Tonight, we're diving into the Marauders fandom. There are some interesting details to follow, but I'll keep everything gentle enough for sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine a world that exists almost entirely in the blank spaces of another story. We all know the boy who lived, the lightning bolt Scar, and the battle against the Dark Lord. But for a massive, dedicated, and incredibly creative corner of the internet, the real story happened 20 years before Harry Potter ever stepped foot on the Hogwarts Express. This is the era of the Marauders. In the original books, the Marauders are ghosts, and they are memories held by grieving teachers, bitter enemies, and weary survivors. Them in flashes, like old photographs caught in a fire. We know their names: James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. We know their nicknames: Prongs, Padfoot, Moony, and Wormtail, and we know their tragedy. By the time the main story ends, every single one of them is gone. But where the official canon gave us fragments, the fandom built a cathedral. Over the last 2 decades, and with a massive resurgence in the 2020s, this community has taken a handful of names and a few lines of backstory and expanded them into a sprawling, multi-generational epic. They have filled in the class schedules, the teenage heartbreaks, the late-night pranks, and the slow-motion car crash of a looming wizarding war. They've turned a group of 4 boys into a symbol of found family, rebellion, and the bittersweet beauty of youth. The Marauders fandom is a unique phenomenon in the world of literature. It is a fandom that often prioritizes collective headcanon over the source material itself. It is a world where the aesthetic of the 1970s, record players, leather jackets, and Polaroid cameras blends seamlessly with ancient magic. It's a world where minor characters, like Regulus Black or Lily Evans, are elevated to lead protagonists with complex internal lives. What is it about these 4 boys from the 1970s that keeps us coming back? Why has a story that we already know ends in betrayal and death become one of the most popular corners of modern fan fiction? Tonight, we're going to explore the history of this movement, from its early roots in the late 90s to the massive viral success of works like All the Young Dudes. We'll look at the core pillars of the fandom, the ships that define it, and the way this community has reclaimed and reshaped a universe to make it their own. We are looking at a lost generation, a group of friends who are brilliant, arrogant, brave, and deeply flawed. We are looking at the invention of the Marauders map, the secret of the Animagi, and the weight of a war that demanded they grow up much too fast. Whether you are a long-time resident of this era or you're just curious about why your social media feed is suddenly full of fan art of boys in Gryffindor sweaters, settle in. We're going back to 1971, to the beginning of a friendship that changed the wizarding world forever. This is the deep dive into the Marauders. It is hard now to imagine a time before the Marauders. Before the 4 names that became a constellation in the sky of this fandom. But there was a time, a very specific moment when they were just that. 4 names, spoken in a single sentence, and then forgotten. That moment was 1999, the year the world first met the Marauders map. Think about what that was like for a reader, opening for the first time. You had already lived through 2 years at Hogwarts. You knew the castle, the moving staircases, the portraits that gossiped. You knew Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but you did not know the story of the map. You did not know that a piece of parchment, seemingly blank, could hold so much weight. The scene is unforgettable. Harry, in his first year, had been caught by Filch with a mysterious package. But in the 3rd year, it is a different kind of discovery. The map is introduced by Fred and George Weasley, 2 pranksters who have clearly inherited a legacy they do not fully understand. They hand it over to Harry with a simple warning: don't let Filch get it. And then, the magic. The map, when tapped with a wand, reveals itself. It is not just a map of Hogwarts, it is a map of every person, every ghost, every secret passage. It shows the castle as a living thing, a network of moving souls. But the most important detail, the one that would change everything for a certain kind of reader, was the signature at the bottom. 4 names written in a looping, confident hand: Messrs. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers. They are proud of that title. You can feel it in the ink. For the first time, the reader is given a glimpse into a world that existed before Harry. A world of 4 boys, Gryffindors, who are not just good, but brilliant. Who are not just rule followers, but rule breakers. The map is a testament to their genius. It is a piece of magic so complex that even the most powerful wizards in the story cannot replicate it. And it is a secret that Harry, and only Harry, is trusted with. The initial shock of that reveal, the moment when the names are finally explained, is a masterclass in storytelling. It happens in the Shrieking Shack, in the 3rd book. Remus Lupin, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, is the one who connects the dots. He looks at the map, and he sees the past. He sees the 4 boys he once called friends. He sees James, who was Prongs. He sees Sirius, who was Padfoot. He sees Peter, who was Wormtail. And he sees himself, Moony. The revelation is layered. It is not just about the map. It is about the friendship that created it. It is about the sacrifices they made for each other. The fact that Remus was a werewolf and that his friends, in an act of extraordinary loyalty and bravery, became Animagi so they could be with him during the full moon. They did not just break rules, they broke the very laws of magic to keep him company. For the reader, this is a sudden, overwhelming flood of information. These 4 names, which had been a footnote, a signature on a piece of parchment, are now revealed to be the core of a tragedy. They are the parents of Harry's world. They are the reason he is an orphan. They are the reason he is hunted. And they are the reason he has a chance. The map, in that moment, becomes more than a tool. It becomes a symbol of a lost generation. A generation of boys who are brilliant and brave and doomed. The map shows you where everyone is, but it cannot show you where they will end up. It cannot show you the war, the betrayal, the death. It only shows you the castle, the secret passages, the moving souls. And that is the seed. That is the tiny, perfect seed that the fandom would take and grow into a forest. A single magical artifact, a piece of parchment, transformed 4 background names into an obsession. Because the map is a promise. It is a promise that there is a story there. A story that is only hinted at. A story that is waiting to be told. The fandom, in its earliest days, was built on that promise. In the 1999 release of gave the readers the map. It gave them the names. It gave them the tragedy. But it did not give them the details. It did not give them the school years. It did not give them the pranks. It did not give them the love. It gave them only the outline, the skeleton of a friendship. And that is where the magic of the Marauders fandom truly begins. It is not in the pages of the book. It is in the space between them. The space where the reader, the fan, the writer has to fill in the blanks. The map is the key. It is the invitation. It says, here is a world, here is a secret. Now come and find it. The next chapter, Scarcity as a Creative Engine, will explore exactly that. It will look at how the fandom took that small, emotionally loaded amount of material and built an entire era, an entire aesthetic, an entire culture out of the gaps. Because the map, for all its magic, could not show you everything. And that, in the end, is the greatest gift it could have given. The Marauders map, as we explored in the last chapter, is more than just a piece of parchment that reveals secrets. It is a symbol of something much deeper, something that has drawn thousands of fans into a world that barely exists in the books. The map itself is a creation of 4 boys who, for a few short years, had the run of Hogwarts Castle. But here is the thing that makes this fandom so unique, so powerful, and so enduring. The map is almost all we have of them. Canon gives us a handful of scenes, a few key memories, and the weight of a tragedy that has already happened by the time Harry reads those names. And that scarcity, that deliberate withholding of information, is the very thing that has fueled an entire creative universe. Think about what we actually know about the Marauders from the books. We know they were troublemakers. We know they were brilliant. We know they created the map. And we know that by the time Harry arrives at Hogwarts, 3 of them are dead and 1 is a traitor. That is it. That is the sum total of their official story. There is no prequel series. There is no detailed account of their school years. There is no book called Harry Potter and the Lost Generation. And that absence, that gap in the narrative, is what makes the Marauders fandom so fascinating to study. Because when canon leaves a void, the human mind cannot help but fill it. This is the psychological appeal of what we might call the Lost Generation. These are characters who matter enormously to the main story. They are the parents of the hero, the mentors, the tragic figures whose choices shaped everything. But we only see them through a glass darkly, through memory and testimony and fragmented flashbacks. And that limited information, that scarcity of detail, breeds the most intense kind of fan creativity. It is the same reason we are drawn to old photographs, to faded letters, to half-remembered stories. The gaps are where our imagination takes root. Consider what the fandom has done with the 1970s era. Because there is no prequel series, no official account of what life was like at Hogwarts during the First Wizarding War, fans have been forced to become the primary architects of that world. They have built the dormitories and the common rooms and the secret passages. They have written the pranks and the detentions and the quiet moments of friendship. They have invented the rivalries and the romances and the heartbreaks. And they have done it all from a handful of clues, a few lines of dialogue, and the knowledge that this story is heading toward a tragic end. The Marauders map is the perfect anchor for this phenomenon. It is a document that shows movement, that reveals secrets, that charts the hidden life of a castle. And the fandom has done the same thing. They have taken the map of Canon with its vast empty spaces, and they have filled in every corridor, every classroom, every moment of the day. They have given us a Hogwarts that is fully realised, a 1970s that feels as real as the 1990s of the original books. And they have done it because they had to, because no one else was going to. There is a special kind of tension that comes from writing about a lost generation. You know the ending. You know that James and Lily will die in a cottage, leaving their son to be raised by his aunt and uncle. You know that Sirius will spare a crime he did not commit. You know that Remus will live a life of poverty and loneliness and self-loathing. You know that Peter will betray them all. And yet, you write their youth. You write their laughter. You write their first Quidditch match and their first full moon together and the night they finish the map. Because that is the only way to make the tragedy meaningful. That is the only way to understand what was lost. And that is what we will explore in the next chapter. The original 4, a study in archetypes, because each of these boys represents something different, something essential to the story that the fandom has built. But for now, let us sit with this idea. Let us sit with the scarcity, because it is the empty spaces on the map that have given us the most to explore. It is the gaps in the story that have allowed us to become the storytellers. And it is the knowledge that we are filling in a tragedy that makes every word we write feel like a small act of defiance against the darkness. We ended the last chapter by talking about scarcity as a creative engine, about how the canon gave us just enough to spark an entire universe. And nowhere is that more true than with the 4 boys who started it all. The original 4, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. In the modern fandom, you often hear them referred to as the Gryffindor Golden Boys. It's a phrase that carries a certain weight, a certain image. You picture them as the popular kids, the ones who had it all. The handsome captain of the Quidditch team, the rebellious heir to an ancient house, the quiet and clever scholar, and the loyal friend who would follow them anywhere. It's a neat and tidy package, a perfect little archetype for a perfect little friendship. But the reality, the one that lives in the pages of the books and not just in the fan art, is much more complicated. It's a darker reality, because these were not just golden boys. These were 4 boys who, for a significant portion of their school years, were bullies. They were the ones who hexed people in the corridors for fun. They were the ones who, according to Severus Snape's worst memory, attacked a fellow student for no reason other than boredom and a desire to show off. And that's the tension at the heart of this entire fandom. The fandom wants to love them. It wants to romanticize their friendship, their pranks, their creation of the Marauders map. But the canon forces us to confront the fact that this same group of boys, the ones who became Animagi for a friend, the ones who spent their full moons together in the Shrieking Shack, were also capable of cruelty. So let's break down the canonical foundations of each of them. Let's look at who they really were before the fandom took over and turned them into something else. First, there's James Potter, the charismatic leader, the one who everyone looked to. He was the star of the Quidditch team, the head boy, the one who seemed to have everything. He was handsome. It's why he was talented, he was wealthy, and he was also, by his own admission, an arrogant hag. He was the one who started the fights with Snape. He was the one who used the invisibility cloak to spy on people. He was the one who, in his 5th year, was described by Lily Evans as having a saving people thing that she found deeply irritating. But here's the thing about James. He grew up. That's the key. He grew up. By his 7th year, he had become a prefect. He had stopped hexing people for fun. He had become the kind of man who would stand in front of Voldemort without a wand, telling him to take his son instead. The canon gives us that arc. It shows us the arrogant boy who becomes a selfless man. Then there's Sirius Black, the rebel, the one who ran away from home at 16. He was the fire, the anger, the one who wanted to burn everything his family stood for to the ground. He was the one who, according to Remus, was always looking for a bit of trouble. He was the one who, even as an adult, was described as having a reckless nature. But Sirius is also the one who was the most damaged, the most broken. He was the one who spent 12 years in Azkaban for a crime he didn't commit. And he was the one who, when he escaped, was still living in the past. He was the one who, in the end, couldn't see past his own desire for revenge. Then there's Remus Lupin, the scholar, the quiet one, the one who was made a prefect in his 5th year, partly because Dumbledore hoped he would be a good influence on James and Sirius. He was the one who carried the burden of his lycanthropy, the one who was always on the outside, the one who was always afraid of being found out. And that's the tragedy of Remus. He was the moral centre of the group, but he was also the one who stood by and watched. He was the one who, in his own words, didn't like what James and Sirius did, but he never stopped them. He was the one who, when he was a teacher, was too afraid of losing his job to tell the truth about Sirius. And finally, there's Peter Pettigrew, the follower, the one who was always in the background, the one who was described as being a bit of a fool by the Sorting Hat. He was the one who was, in the end, the weakest. He was the one who betrayed them all. But here's the thing about Peter. He was also the one who, for a long time, was a good friend. He was the one who, with James and Sirius, became an Animagus to help Remus. He was the one who, for 7 years, was part of the group. He was the one who, in the end, was so afraid of death that he chose to betray his friends. So when you look at the original 4, you see the archetypes, the leader, the rebel, the scholar, the follower. But you also see the cracks. You see the arrogance, the recklessness, the passivity, and the fear. And that's what makes the fandom so fascinating. Because the fandom takes these 4 boys, these 4 archetypes, and it tries to build a world around them. It tries to fill in the gaps. It tries to make them more than just the sum of their canon parts. But the canon is still there. It's still the foundation. And it's a foundation that is, in many ways, built on a lie. The lie that they were just golden boys. The lie that they were just a group of friends who had a bit of fun. The truth is much darker. The truth is that they were bullies. The truth is that they were cruel. And the truth is that they were also, in the end, heroes. And that's the tension. That's the thing that keeps the fandom going. Because you have to hold both of those things in your head at the same time. You have to love them for what they became, while also acknowledging what they were. And that brings us to the next chapter. The chapter where it all began. The chapter where 4 boys, each carrying their own weight, each carrying their own darkness, walked into the Great Hall for the first time. The chapter where the Sorting Hat made a decision that would change everything. The chapter where the original 4 became the Marauders. We ended the last chapter with the Gryffindor Golden Boys, but the truth is, we were looking at them through the wrong end of the telescope. We were seeing them as they were remembered, as they became. But before they were Prongs and Padfoot and Moony and Wormtail, before they were heroes or traitors or anything at all, they were just 4 boys on a train. And that train, that first meeting, is where everything really begins. The year is 1971, September 1st. The Hogwarts Express is pulling out of King's Cross Station, and if you try to hold that moment in your mind, you'll find it's made of fragments. There is no single canon account of that first meeting. We have only the echoes, the way Sirius remembers it in the Shrieking Shack, the way Remus mentions it in passing. We have to reconstruct it from those scattered pieces, like trying to remember a dream after you've already woken up. What we know is this: there were 2 boys in a compartment. One was small and dark, with a pinched face and a nervous energy. The other was broad-shouldered, already handsome, already confident, and then the door slid open, and a 3rd boy walked in. He was tall, he was pale, and he had the look of someone who had been raised in a house where the walls had ears. He was bleeding from a fight he'd already had on the platform, a fight with his own family, a fight he'd chosen to have because he refused to be sorted into Slytherin. That 3rd boy was Sirius Black, and the moment he stepped into that compartment, the Marauders were born. Think about the weight of that. The entire fandom, the entire culture of fan fiction, the millions of words written about these 4 boys, all of it traces back to a single decision by a 12-year-old. Sirius Black chose to sit with James Potter and Peter Pettigrew instead of with his own cousins. He chose to be a Gryffindor before the Sorting Hat even touched his head. And that choice, that act of defiance, is the seed from which everything else grows. Now we have to be careful here. The fandom has built a very specific image of this first meeting. It in Polaroid filters, in the aesthetic of vinyl records and corduroy jackets. We've given the 1970s a kind of golden, sepia-toned glow, but that's not how it felt. That's not how it was. The 1970s were not a cozy decade. They were a decade of tension, of war, of cultural fracture. The real world was dealing with the aftermath of Vietnam, with the oil crisis, with the slow unravelling of old certainties, and the wizarding world was no different. When you look at the Marauders' timeline, from 1971 to 19, looking at a mirror of that real-world 70s culture. The first Wizarding War was already simmering. Voldemort was already rising. The Order of the Phoenix was already forming in the shadows. These boys were not growing up in a peaceful time. They were growing up in the last years before everything broke. And that's why the fandom has latched onto this specific aesthetic, this Polaroid and vinyl nostalgia. It's a way of softening the edges. It's a way of pretending that the tragedy hasn't happened yet. But the tragedy is already there, even in that first meeting. Because look at the 4th member of the compartment. Peter Pettigrew is there, but he's not part of the conversation. He's watching, he's listening. Yeah, he's the one who will later betray them all. And even now, in this first moment, there's something about him that doesn't quite fit. He's not a leader, he's not a rebel, he's a follower, and he's already looking for someone to follow. The fandom has tried to reconstruct this scene 1,000 times. We've written it as a moment of instant friendship, of 4 souls finding each other. But the truth is more complicated. James and Sirius bond immediately over their shared love of chaos. Remus joins them later, drawn by their laughter, by the way they seem to fill the compartment with light. And Peter is just there. He's just lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. And that luck, that accident of proximity, will define his entire life. This is the moment that the Marauders fandom is built on. This single train ride. This single act of choosing. Because if Sirius had sat with his cousins, if he had let the Black family name pull him into Slytherin, the entire story changes. James and Remus and Peter become a different trio. The map is never made. The war is fought differently. And Harry Potter, the boy who lives, is born into a world where his father's best friend is a stranger. But Sirius didn't sit with his cousins. He chose the compartment with the laughing boy and the nervous one. And that choice, that moment of defiance, is what the fandom has been trying to capture for over 2 decades. We've given it a soundtrack of 70s rock, a filter of faded photographs, a texture of worn-out corduroy. We've built an entire aesthetic around the idea that these 4 boys were something special, something golden, something that could only exist in that one perfect moment before the war took everything. And that's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? The lie that the 1970s were a simpler time, that the Marauders were just pranksters, that the tragedy was something that happened later. But it was already there. It was in the way Sirius's hand was still shaking from the fight on the platform. It was in the way Remus was already hiding a secret that would define his entire life. It was in the way Peter was already looking for someone to hold on to. The tragedy wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning. So when we reconstruct that first meeting, when we try to imagine what it was like for 4 boys to find each other on the Hogwarts Express, we have to hold both truths at once: the joy of discovery, the weight of what's coming, the laughter and the fear, the Polaroid and the war, because that's what the Marauders fandom is really about. It's not about escaping into a simpler time. It's about sitting with the complexity of knowing how a story ends and still choosing to love the beginning. It's about looking at those 4 boys on the train, in their corduroy and their hand-me-down robes, and seeing not just what they were, but what they would become. The map makers, the war fighters, the ones who would lose everything. And that brings us to the next piece of the puzzle, because if this first meeting on the train is where the Marauders begin, then the next step is where they truly become themselves. It's the moment when Remus's secret is discovered, when the other 3 realise what he is, and when they make a choice that will define their entire friendship. It's the moment that leads to the Shrieking Shack, to the howls in the night, to the map that finally bears their names. That's the story we're going to tell next. That's the secret of the Shrieking Shack. If you were to walk through the Hogwarts grounds on a full moon in the early 1970s, you might have noticed something peculiar. The Shrieking Shack, that infamous crooked building in Hogsmeade, would erupt with sounds that sent shivers through the village. Howls, crashes, the splintering of wood. The locals knew to stay indoors, and the students whispered about hauntings. But the truth, as with so many things in the wizarding world, was far stranger and far sadder than any ghost story. That truth belongs to Remus Lupin, the quiet boy with the threadbare robes and the tired eyes, who had been sorted into Gryffindor alongside James Potter, Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew just a few years earlier. The sorting had been their first act of alignment, but their second, and far more binding, act was the discovery that their new friend carried a secret so heavy it could have crushed him. It was the secret of the Shrieking Shack, and it began not with a confession, but with a careful, terrified observation, because Remus Lupin was a werewolf. Let's be clear, this wasn't something he chose, and it wasn't something he could control. He had been bitten as a young child, and every month, when the moon swelled to its fullest, he transformed into a beast with no memory and no restraint. His parents had tried everything, but the only option that kept him alive, and at Hogwarts, was the arrangement made by Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore, seeing a brilliant mind and a gentle soul beneath the curse, decided to take a risk that many in the wizarding world would call reckless, even dangerous. He allowed Remus to attend school, but only under the strictest conditions. A secure underground passage was built from the Whomping Willow to the Shrieking Shack, where Remus would be confined during every full moon. The shack was soundproofed, the walls thick with enchantment, but the howls still escaped. And that, in essence, was the moral complexity of Dumbledore's decision. He gave a child an education, a chance at a life, but he also placed him in a cage every month, isolated and alone, while the rest of the school slept safely in their beds. It was James, Sirius, and Peter who stumbled onto the truth. They were relentless, curious boys, the kind who could never leave a mystery alone. They followed Remus one evening, watched him slip beneath the Whomping Willow's violent branches, and, when the moon rose, they heard the transformation. In that moment their world split. They had a choice: fear the monster or love the friend, and they chose the latter. That was the moment when the Marauders transformed from a casual friendship into a pact that would define their lives. It's easy to romanticize it now, to imagine a dramatic scene of acceptance and tearful hugs, but in reality, it must have been terrifying. Sirius, who grew up in a house that celebrated blood purity and viewed werewolves as subhuman, had to unlearn everything he was taught. James, the privileged prince, had to see past the danger, and Peter, the nervous follower, had to find courage he didn't know he possessed. They didn't just keep Remus's secret, they made it their own. They started calling his monthly transformation the furry little problem, a term so casual and loving that it stripped the horror away. They sat with him in the hospital wing, brought him homework, told him jokes through the door. They decided, against all logic, that they would never let him face the moon alone again. But sitting outside a locked shack could only do so much. True loyalty demanded something more radical, and that radical solution, the one that would require years of sacrifice and illegal magic, is where our story is heading next. Because the boys soon realized that the only way to truly be with Remus during the transformation was to become creatures themselves. Creatures who could survive the wolf's fury, who could run beside him in the dark. That journey would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, and it would forge a bond that even death could not break. But that's a story for another night. The previous chapter left us in the Shrieking Shack, with Remus Lupin's secret lying open between the four boys, like a wound that could either bind them together or tear them apart. It was a secret that could have ended everything: expulsion, isolation, the permanent fracture of a friendship barely 2 years old. Instead, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew made a choice that would define the next 3 years of their lives. A choice so audacious, so dangerous, and so utterly illegal that it borders on the kind of devotion we usually reserve for saints or fools. They decided to become Animagi. Now the word Animagus might sound like a simple label, a wizard who can transform into an animal at will, but in the magical world is one of the rarest and most difficult achievements a witch or wizard can attempt. The Ministry of Magic keeps a strict registry of all known Animagi, and in the entire 20th century, only 7 had been officially recorded before the Marauders' time. That number alone should tell you something about the sheer magical difficulty involved. This is not a spell you learn in a textbook. It is not a potion you brew and drink like a cup of tea. Becoming an Animagus demands years of preparation, an intimate understanding of both human and animal anatomy, and a willingness to risk your very soul in the process. The transformation is not taught at Hogwarts because it is considered too dangerous for students. The process can go horribly wrong, leaving you trapped in a half-human, half-animal state, or worse, permanently disfigured. And yet James, Sirius and Peter, 15-year-old boys with nothing but nerve and loyalty, decided they would master it. For Remus, the Canon tells us it took them 3 years. 3 years of secret meetings in the library, of smuggling forbidden texts from the restricted section, of stealing ingredients for a potion that had to be held in the mouth for an entire lunar cycle without swallowing or spitting. Imagine the taste of that potion, acrid, metallic, burning against the tongue, and imagine holding it there for weeks, night and day, while attending classes, eating meals, sleeping. One slip, one accidental swallow, and the entire process would reset. They had to coordinate their schedules, hide their symptoms, and lie to teachers and fellow students for 3 straight years. And all of it was done in service of one goal: to be able to accompany Remus during the full moon, to sit with him in the Shrieking shack, to prevent him from being alone during the most terrifying night of his life. That level of devotion is almost incomprehensible. It is not the casual friendship of shared jokes and late-night study sessions. It is the kind of sacrifice that rewrites your entire adolescence. Every choice they made for 3 years was filtered through the question, will this help us become Animagi? Every risk they took was justified by the end goal, and the end goal was not glory. It was not power. It was simply the ability to be present for a friend who once a month became a monster. Now consider the forms they chose. James Potter became a stag, Sirius Black became a dog, and Peter Pettigrew became a rat. At first glance, these might seem like random selections, perhaps tied to their personalities, their patronuses, or some deeper magical affinity. But there is a reason that James and Sirius chose animals that could physically restrain a werewolf. A stag has antlers, solid, branching weapons that can pin an animal to the ground without killing it. A dog, especially a large breed like the one Sirius became, has a powerful jaw and a thick body built for tackling and holding. Together, a stag and a dog could work in tandem to subdue a transformed Remus, keeping him from harming himself or others and keeping themselves safe in the process. This was not an accident. They did not simply transform into any animal they fancied. They chose forms that would maximize their ability to protect Remus, even at the risk of their own lives. This raises a fascinating question about Peter Pettigrew's role. He became a rat. A rat is small, fast, and easy to overlook, but it is utterly useless for restraining a werewolf. What could a rat possibly do to help during a full moon? The answer, perhaps, is that Peter was not intended to be a frontline defender. He was the lookout, the runner, the one who could slip through cracks and carry messages. In the context of the Animagus quest, Peter's transformation is often seen as proof that he was a less talented wizard than his friends, or that he was simply dragged along by James and Sirius. But that interpretation does a disservice to the difficulty of the magic itself. To become an Animagus at all, even a rat, requires extraordinary skill and determination. Peter may not have been a prodigy like James or Sirius, but he was competent enough to succeed in a feat that most adult wizards never achieve. The question is not whether he could do it, but why he did it. Did he genuinely want to help Remus, or did he follow because he feared being left out of the inner circle? That ambiguity is what makes his later betrayal so tragic. The rat form, so useful for hiding, for scurrying away, becomes a symbol of his eventual cowardice. But at the time, it was a symbol of belonging. The 3-year journey to become Animagi is more than just a plot point. It is the crucible that forged the Marauders into something unbreakable. It turned a group of mischievous boys into a brotherhood willing to break laws, risk their futures, and endure physical and mental hardship for each other. The Shrieking Shack ceased to be a prison for Remus. It became a clubhouse where 4 friends met each month under the light of the full moon, Wolf rampaging, the stag and the dog holding him back, and the rat scuttling in the shadows. That image, the chaos and the tenderness of it, is what the fandom holds on to. It is the origin story of the Marauders map, yes, but more importantly, it is the origin story of a loyalty so fierce that it would eventually shatter. And as their transformations settled and their forms became second nature, the next step was inevitable. They needed names to match their new identities. The titles they chose would echo through the halls of Hogwarts, for decades whispered by students who never knew the faces behind them. But that story, the birth of the nicknames, belongs to the next chapter. because once you have become an animal, you must learn to speak its language, and the Marauders were about to give their secret selves a voice. For nearly 3 years, they had kept a secret so dangerous it could have landed them in Azkaban. James Potter, Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew had spent countless nights memorizing complex incantations, holding mandrake leaves under their tongues for an entire month, wrestling with the volatile magic of Animagus transformation. They had done all of this for one reason: to be with their friend Remus Lupin during the full moon, to change the course of his lonely, painful nights into something shared, something almost bearable. And when the transformation finally took hold, when James became a magnificent stag, and Sirius a shaggy black dog, and Peter a small, nimble rat, they had crossed a threshold. They were no longer just 4 Gryffindor boys, causing mischief in the corridors. They were something else entirely. But a secret this profound demands a language of its own. You cannot have a clandestine operation without a set of code names. And so almost organically, the nicknames were born. Not as an afterthought, not as a clever branding exercise, but as a natural outgrowth of their nightly transformations. When you spend your evenings as a stag, a dog, a rat, and a wolf, the need for new identities becomes immediate. In the whispering gallery of the Shrieking Shack, under the light of a full moon that had once been a source of terror, these 4 young men began to call each other by names that would echo far beyond the confines of Hogwarts. Let us consider the linguistic impact of Moony, Wormtail, Patfoot and Prongs on fan culture. On the surface, these are simple, almost childish nicknames, but their power lies in their specificity and their intimacy. Moony is a direct reference to Remus's condition, a name that acknowledges his darkest secret with a kind of fondness. Wormtail for Peter, derived from his small, scurrying form and his tail, but also a name that hints at something vulnerable, something easily overlooked. Padfoot for Sirius, evoking the soft, heavy footsteps of a large dog padding through the night. And Prongs for James, named for the antlers of a stag, a weapon yes, but also a crown. These nicknames are not generic, they are earned. They are the passwords to a secret society, a brotherhood that exists outside the rules of the school, outside the gaze of professors and prefects. And that is exactly why fans find them so irresistible to replicate. When readers first encountered these names in the pages of, they were not just learning a piece of trivia, they were being invited into a world of coded camaraderie. The Marauders map itself is a document written in this private language. It does not say James Potter, it says Prongs. It does not say Peter Pettigrew, it says Wormtail. The map is a physical artifact of their loyalty, parchment that only speaks their secret names. And for fans, especially those who came of age in the early days of online fandom, this secrecy became a template. Forums and fanfiction communities adopted their own nicknames. Ships were abbreviated into portmanteaus. Inside jokes became code words. The Marauders had shown that a group could have its own lexicon, and fans, hungry for belonging, absorbed that lesson and built entire cultures around it. It is no exaggeration to say that the modern practice of giving characters affectionate shorthand names, from Padfoot and Prongs to the fan-created Wolfstar and Jegulus, traces its roots directly back to these 4 nicknames. They planted the seed of a linguistic tradition that continues to evolve across TikTok and AO3, generation after generation. But there is a darker chapter to this story. The same names that once bound them together would later be used as weapons. When the First Wizarding War reached its horrifying peak, Peter Pettigrew did not simply betray his friends. He betrayed the entire meaning of those nicknames. He was Wormtail, the rat, and he turned informant for Lord Voldemort. The name that had once signified his small, unassuming form became a mark of cowardice and treachery. James and Lily Potter died because the secret keeper they trusted, the one who had shared their most intimate meetings for years, used the very bond of their secret society against them. And after their deaths, Sirius Black, who had been Padfoot, the loyal dog, was framed for the betrayal. He He spent 12 years in Azkaban, his identity twisted into that of a madman, his nickname now a whisper of suspicion and fear. The tragedy deepens when we realise that these names, these beloved code words from a blazing autumn in the 1970s, became the evidence used to condemn them. The Marauders map, that sacred document, would later be the key to exposing the rat in their midst, but by then the damage was done. The secret society had become a tomb, and yet the names endure. They survive in every fan fiction that imagines those early years, in every piece of art that shows a stag and a dog and a rat and a wolf gambling in the moonlight. They are the hooks upon which an entire fandom hangs its coat. They are the invitation to a world where you too can belong to something secret and precious. But the story does not end there. Among all the relationships that grew out of this secret language, one has captured the hearts of readers more than any other. It is a bond that began in those moonlit transformations, in the silent understanding between a wolf and a dog, between Remus Lupin and Sirius Black. And that bond, that fragile, devastating, fan-fueled romance, is the subject of our next chapter. Those nicknames, Moony Wormtail, Padfoot Prongs, gave the Marauders a secret language, a bond sealed in transformation and trust. But of those 4 aliases, 2 would eventually take on a weight far beyond mischief: Moony and Padfoot, Remus Lupin and Sirius Black. And from that pairing, an entire universe of fan fiction would bloom. The origins of the Remus Lupin and Sirius Black pairing, what the internet would come to call Wolfstar, trace back to the earliest days of Harry Potter fandom, the early 2000s, when forums like MuggleNet, the Sugar Quill, and Fiction Alley were the primary gathering places. There, in thread after thread, fans began to notice something, a particular chemistry between the 2 characters that felt pointed, charged, almost scripted. It wasn't just that they had history, it was the way Remus spoke about Sirius, the way Sirius looked at Remus. The prison of Azkaban and the secret of the Shrieking Shack bound them together in ways that went beyond friendship. In those early forums, someone would post a perfectly ambiguous line from Prisoner of Azkaban, a moment where Remus holds Sirius's hand after Peter's escape, or where Sirius says, "I'd die for you," not to James but to Remus, and another fan would reply with a single word, slash, a genre label for male same-sex romance. Over time, these fragments became evidence, a case file. The subtext, they argued, was undeniable. J.K. Rowling may never have intended a romantic relationship, but the text itself seemed to invite it. Remus's loyalty, Sirius's reckless devotion, the shared secret of the werewolf transformation. These were the building blocks of a love story written in shadow. But the debate began almost immediately. Subtext versus intent. Was it there in the pages, or were fans projecting? The pro-Wolfstar camp pointed to moments of intense intimacy. Remus touching Sirius's hand in the Shrieking Shack, the way he never stopped believing in his friend's innocence, the line, "I'd trust him with my life." The anti-Wolfstar camp, or those who preferred a platonic reading, argued that friendship could be just as deep, that the bond of war and survival needed no romance to feel profound. What made Wolfstar so enduring, though, was not a single line of dialogue. It was the tragedy. These were 2 men torn apart by war, betrayal, and death, who never got to live out a quiet life together. Sirius died in the Department of Mysteries, Remus at the Battle of Hogwarts. Their love, whether romantic or platonic, remained unrealised, and that unrealised potential became a blank canvas. Fandom seized on it, turning a handful of canonical gestures into an epic narrative of shared childhood, secret pining, forbidden feelings, and a reunion that always comes too late. Wolfstar became one of the most enduring ships in internet history, because it wasn't just about chemistry, it was about filling a void. The books gave us a story about Harry, about the next generation's fight, but the previous generation, the Marauders, existed only as fragments. Wolfstar gave those fragments a shape. It gave Sirius and Remus a love story that felt earned, that felt hidden in plain sight. Now, as the fandom grew and migrated from early forums to live journal to fan fiction, Net to archive of our own, Wolfstar's popularity only deepened. It became the anchor of the Marauders Fandom, the ship that every other ship orbited around. And with that anchor came a new phenomenon, the rise of the Fanon personalities, the versions of Sirius and Remus that fan fiction invented. The cool, brooding Padfoot and the gentle, bookish Mooney would begin to diverge from the canonical portraits, creating a parallel universe of character that tens of thousands of readers would come to love as if it were real. That transformation, the moment a fandom starts writing its own canon, is where we turn next. In the last chapter, we traced the origins of Wolfstar, that enduring ship between Remus Lupin and Sirius Black, and we saw how it grew from the soil of early internet forums into one of the most resilient pairings in all of fan fiction. But Wolfstar is just one part of a much larger transformation that has taken place within the Marauders fandom. The characters of Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, as they appear in the books, are not the same people you find in the vast majority of fan works. And that is a fascinating thing to explore. When we first meet Sirius Black in the pages of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, he is introduced as a figure of menace. He is described as a convict, a man who has escaped from the wizard prison of Azkaban, and for much of the book, he is a shadowy presence. Harry and his friends believe he is a servant of Voldemort, a man who betrayed their parents and is now coming for them. The book builds him as a threat, a brooding, dangerous figure who has spent 12 years in a place that sucks all happiness and hope from a person. That is the canonical Sirius Black. He is gaunt, he is desperate, and he is driven by a single-minded need for revenge against Peter Pettigrew. But the fan fiction version of Sirius Black is something else entirely. The fandom took that brooding convict and they rebuilt him from the ground up. They gave him back his youth, his humour, and his reckless charm. In the Fanon, Sirius Black is not just a man who escaped from prison. He is a tragic rebel. He is the boy who ran away from a pure-blood family that was steeped in the dark arts. He is the one who chose his friends over his blood, who chose the light over the darkness of his own name. The Fanon Sirius is defined by his defiance, by his leather jackets, by his love of motorbikes and loud music. He is a figure of romantic rebellion, a character who carries the weight of his family's expectations and then throws them aside with a laugh. This transformation happened because the fandom needed a hero. The Canon Sirius is a broken man, but the Fanon Sirius is a man who could have been whole. The fans looked at the few details we have about his time at Hogwarts, his friendship with James, his hatred of his own family, and they built a story around that. They gave him a childhood, a history, a personality that was more than just the bitterness of a long imprisonment. They made him the kind of person you could fall in love with, the kind of person you could root for, even though you know how his story ends. And then there is Remus Lupin. In the books, Remus is a quiet, gentle, and deeply tired man. He is the kind of person who has been worn down by life, by the burden of his condition, by the loneliness of being a werewolf in a world that fears him. He is kind, he is thoughtful, but he is also a man who has learned to keep his head down. He is a prefect, a rule follower, a person who has spent his entire life trying to be good enough to be accepted. But the Fanon Remus is something else. He is the chocolate-loving, cardigan-wearing intellectual. He is the one who reads, the one who is soft and gentle and kind. He is the heart of the group, the one who holds them together when everything else is falling apart. In the Fanon, Remus is not just a werewolf. He is a scholar, poet, person who finds comfort in small things. He is the one who always has a book, who always has a piece of advice, who always has a piece of chocolate to share when things get hard. This transformation is fascinating because it takes the few details we have from the books and it expands them. In the books, Remus is a man who has been through a lot. He is tired, he is worn, but he is also kind. The fandom took that kindness and made it his whole identity. They gave him a wardrobe, a love of warm things, a quiet intelligence that is not just about being a prefect, but about being a person who understands the world. The Fanon Remus is a comfort character, a person you want to be around, a person who makes the world feel a little bit safer. And then is James Potter. In the books, James is a complicated figure. Him, through the eyes of his son, through the eyes of his enemies, and through the memories of his friends. The James in the books is not always kind. He is a bully, a person who used to hex people for fun, who used to show off in front of Lily Evans. He is a character who is not always easy to like. He is a golden boy, but he is also a mean one. But the fandom has taken that, and they have transformed him. The Fanon James is the golden boy. He is the one who is brave, who is loyal, who is the best friend you could ever have. He is the one who is always there, who is always ready with a prank, who is always ready to stand up for his friends. The Fanon James is not a bully. He is a hero. He is the kind of person who would die for his friends, who would do anything to protect the people he loves. This divergence between the mean James of the books and the golden boy, James of the fandom, is one of the most interesting things about the Marauders fandom. The books give us a character who is flawed, who is real, who is not always good, but the fandom gives us a character who is perfect, who is everything we want him to be. And that is the power of fan fiction. It allows us to take the fragments we have and to build something new. It allows us to take a character who is a brooding convict and to make him a tragic rebel. It allows us to take a tired, worn-out man and to make him a chocolate-loving intellectual. It allows us to take a bully and to make him a hero. And this is not just about the Marauders. This is about the entire world of Harry Potter. The fandom has taken the small amount of material we have, and it has built an entire universe. It has given us a school life, a history, a world that is full of detail and emotion. It has given us characters who are more than just the people we meet in the books. They are people we know, people we love, people we have come to understand. And this brings us to the next chapter, where we will look at another character who has been transformed by the fandom, Lily Evans. In the books, she is a prize to be won, a beautiful girl who James chases and eventually wins. But in the fandom, she is so much more. She is a force of her own, a person with her own story, her own life, her own choices. And that is a story we will explore next. We've spent these last few chapters tracing how the Marauders fandom took a handful of Canon scraps and wove them into an entire world. We've watched Sirius Black transform from a brooding convict into a tragic rebel, and Remus Lupin from a weary, scarred survivor into the cardigan-wearing intellectual who became the emotional heart of a generation of fan fiction. But there's one character who has undergone an even more radical transformation, and she's arguably the most important figure in this entire story. I'm talking about Lily Evans. If you only know Lily from the canon, you probably know her from a single devastating memory. It's the memory that Harry witnesses in Snape's worst memory. The one where a teenage James Potter is strutting around the Hogwarts courtyard like a peacock, trying to impress a girl who wants nothing to do with him. And for years, that was Lily's entire identity in the fandom. She was the prize. She was the beautiful redhead who eventually fell for the arrogant jock, the one who had to be won. She was the reason for the rivalry, the object of the affection, but never really the subject of her own story. But the Marauders fandom, especially in the last few years, has been engaged in a quiet and powerful reclamation project. They've been moving beyond that version of Lily, the one who exists only as a footnote in someone else's memory. They've been digging into the few details we have from canon, and then building an entire personality around them. And what they've found is a girl who was never just a prize to be won. Let's go back to what we actually know about Lily Evans from the books. She was a Muggle-born witch, raised in a house that was, by all accounts, tense and complicated. Her sister Petunia resented her, and that resentment created a gulf between them that never fully closed. Lily arrived at Hogwarts in 1971, and she was immediately sorted into Gryffindor. That's a significant detail, because it tells you something about her character. Gryffindor is the house of courage, of nerve, of daring, and for a Muggle-born girl, entering a world that was already beginning to fracture along blood purity lines. That took real bravery. She was also described as exceptionally bright. Slughorn, the potions master, called her one of his favourite students. He said she had a natural talent for potions that was, in his words, quite remarkable. And that's not just a throwaway compliment. Potions is a subject that requires precision, patience, and a deep understanding of how ingredients interact. It's a science, and Lily was a scientist. She was methodical, she was clever, and she was not easily impressed. Then there's her role in the Order of the Phoenix. We know from the books that she and James were both members of the original Order, the first resistance against Voldemort. They were on the front lines. They were fighting a war. And that's where the fan fiction really begins to expand. Because if you're going to write a story about the Marauders, about their school years and their early adulthood, you have to decide who Lily Evans is. And the fandom has made a choice. They've chosen to see her as the glue of the group. Think about it. The Marauders are 4 boys, and they're a chaotic, self-contained system. They're a closed loop. James and Sirius are the instigators, the ones who start the fires. Remus is the conscience, the one who tries to put them out. And Peter is the follower, the one who goes along for the ride. But that system needs an outside force, something to anchor it. And in the Fanon, that force is often Lily. She's not just the girl who James eventually marries. She's the one who calls him out. She's the one who refuses to be charmed by his pranks, who sees through his bravado and demands that he be better. In the fan fiction, that's the arc of the Gilly relationship, the James and Lily ship. It's not a story about a boy winning a girl. It's a story about a boy learning to grow up, and a girl who refuses to settle for anything less than that growth. There's a famous moment in the Fanon, one that's been written and rewritten 1,000 times. It's the scene where James finally asks Lily out, and she says no. But in the Fanon, she doesn't just say no, she tells him why. She tells him that he's arrogant, that he's reckless, that he uses his privilege to bully people. She tells him that she's not interested in a boy who thinks the world owes him something. And that moment, that rejection is what starts James's real transformation. It's what makes him look at himself, and it's what pushes him to become the man who will eventually die, protect his family. And that's the key. Lily Evans in the Fanon is not a prize. She's a catalyst. She's the person who forces the Marauders to confront their own flaws. She's the one who holds them accountable. And in the later years, when the war begins to tighten its grip, she's the one who keeps them together. She's the one who organises the safe houses, who coordinates the supplies, who makes sure that everyone has a place to go. She's the one who, in the final months, becomes the heart of the resistance. There's a reason why the fandom has latched onto this version of Lily. It's because the canon gives us just enough to know that she was extraordinary, but it doesn't give us the details. We know she was brave. We know she was brilliant. We know she was loved, but we don't know how she became that person. And that's the space that the fan fiction fills. In the Fanon, Lily is often written as an activist. She's a girl who, from her very first year at Hogwarts, is aware of the political currents swirling around her. She's a Muggle-born in a world that is increasingly hostile to people like her. And she doesn't just accept that, she fights back. She writes letters to the Daily Prophet. She organises study groups for younger Muggle-born students who are struggling. She stands up to the pure-blood supremacists in her own house, even when it costs her. And that's what makes the Gilly romance so compelling. It's not a schoolyard rivalry that turns into a wartime partnership. It's a partnership that was forged in the fire of that war. James and Lily don't get together in a peaceful, easy time. They get together in the middle of a crisis. They get together when the world is falling apart. And that means their love is not a fairy tale. It's a choice. It's a deliberate, conscious decision to stand with each other, even when it would be easier to walk away. There's a particular fan fiction, one that's become almost canonical in its own right, that captures this perfectly. It's called All the Young Judes, and it's the story that, for many fans, defines the entire Marauders era. In that story, Lily is not just a side character, she's a force. She's the one who sees through the posturing, who understands the stakes, and who refuses to let anyone forget what they're fighting for. She's the one who, when James is being reckless, pulls him back. She's the one who, when Remus is drowning in self-doubt, reminds him that he's worth saving. She's the one who, in the end, becomes the anchor, and that's the version of Lily that the fandom has reclaimed. She's not the girl in the memory. She's not the one who's being chased. She's the one who's doing the chasing, but not for love. She's chasing justice. She's chasing a world where her son can grow up without fear. She's chasing a future that, tragically, she will never live to see. That's the weight of this fandom. It's the knowledge that every story, every romance, every moment of joy is shadowed by the end. We know how it ends. We know that James and Lily die in a house in Godric's Hollow on a cold October night. We know that their son is left on a doorstep and that he grows up in a world that barely remembers them. And that knowledge, that tragic inevitability, is what gives the fan fiction its power. So when we write Lily Evans, when we read her, when we imagine her, we're not just filling in the gaps, we're honouring her. We're giving her the life that she deserved, the one that the canon couldn't give her. We're making her more than a prize. We're making her a person. And that brings us to the next chapter in this story. Because if Lily Evans is the heart of the Marauders, then there's another character who is the shadow. There's another figure who haunts this fandom, who represents everything that the Marauders were fighting against and everything that they lost. I'm talking about the Black family and the tapestry that tells their story. That's what we'll explore in the next chapter, when we look at the Black family tree and the dark legacy that it leaves behind. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. We ended the last chapter with Lily Evans, watching her step out of the shadow of being merely a prize to be won, and into the light of her own fierce agency. But to understand the full gravitational pull of the Marauders era, we have to look at the family that produced two of its most central figures and one of its most enduring tragedies. We have to look at the House of Black. In canon, the Black family is introduced as a relic, a dark tapestry hanging in the gloom of 12 Grimmauld Place. Sirius describes them with a kind of bitter, exhausted contempt. They are a line of pure-blood wizards, the noble and most ancient House of Black, a phrase that sounds less like a title and more like a curse. Their motto is, toujours pur, always pure, and they have a family tree where every disowned member is literally burned off the tapestry, leaving a scorched hole in the fabric. That is the canon image. A family so obsessed with blood purity that they would rather erase a child than acknowledge a stain. But the fandom, in its relentless loving way, could not leave that tapestry as a simple backdrop. They had to pull it down, spread it out, and read every thread. They had to turn the Blacks into a Shakespearean tragedy. And the heart of that tragedy, the fulcrum on which the entire Marauders story pivots, is the contrast between two brothers, Sirius Black and Regulus Black. In canon, we know Sirius as the rebel, the one who ran away at 16, who was taken in by James Potter's family, who traded the dark opulence of his childhood for the warm chaos of a Gryffindor dormitory. He is loud, reckless, and brave. He is also deeply, profoundly wounded. His rebellion is not just a teenage phase, it is a survival instinct. He looks at his family and sees a house full of people who would rather be pure than happy, and he chooses to burn. But then there is Regulus, the younger brother, the one who stayed. For years, Regulus Black existed in the margins of the story. He was the brother who died, the one who joined the Death Eaters, the one who was mentioned in passing as a cautionary tale. But then slowly, the fandom began to look at him. They began to ask the question that the books never quite answered. Why did he stay? And this is where the Black family tapestry becomes something far more complex than a simple story of good and evil. The fandom, in its best moments, does not just write fan fiction about Regulus. They write a psychological autopsy. They imagine a boy raised in a house where the wallpaper is woven with threats, where the lullabies are about blood purity, where his mother's love is a conditional thing that can be revoked with a single wrong word. They imagine a boy who loves his brother and watches that brother leave and does not know how to follow. The contrast between Sirius and Regulus is not a contrast between a hero and a villain. It is a contrast between two different kinds of survival. Sirius survives by running. He runs so fast and so far that he never looks back. He builds a new identity, a new family, a new life. He becomes Padfoot. He becomes a marauder. He becomes so thoroughly unblack, he can barely remember the boy he used to be. Regulus survives by staying. He stays because he does not know what else to do. He stays because the house is all he has ever known. He stays because he is told, over and over again, that the family name is the only thing that matters. And he believes it until he does not. And that is the tragedy, the moment when Regulus stops believing. In Canon, we know the barest outline of his story. He joins the Death Eaters. He gets in over his head. He tries to leave, and he cannot. He steals the locket, the Horcrux, and he takes it to the cave, and he dies, dragged under by the Inferi, because he was too young and too scared and too alone to know how to ask for help. But the fandom took that outline, and they filled it in. They wrote the conversations that never happened. They wrote the moment when Regulus looks at his brother and wants to say something and cannot. They wrote the letters that were never sent. They wrote the version of the story where Regulus is not a villain, but a victim of the same system that Sirius escaped. And this is where the Black family becomes a Shakespearean tragedy, because in the fandom, the House of Black is not just a family, it is a stage. It is a place where the drama of blood purity is played out in miniature. You have the matriarch, Walburga, whose portrait screams at the inhabitants of Grimmauld Place, a ghost made of paint and fury. You have the patriarch, Orion, who is often written as a silent, distant figure, a man who let his wife do the screaming. You have the cousins, Bellatrix, Andromeda, Narcissa, each one a different path through the same forest. Bellatrix chooses the dark, Andromeda chooses love, Narcissa chooses her son. And then you have the two boys, Sirius and Regulus, the one who burned and the one who was burned. The fandom has spent decades trying to understand Regulus. They have written him as a secret poet, as a boy who loved his brother so much that he could not bear to see him go. They have written him as a reluctant Death Eater, as someone who joined because he was told to, and who tried to leave because he realized what he had done. They have written him as a hero, the one who figured out the secret of the Horcrux, who tried to destroy it, who died trying to save the world from the very people he had once admired. And in doing so, they have turned the Black family into something more than a footnote. They have turned it into a mirror, a reflection of the entire wizarding world's obsession with blood, with legacy, with the idea that your name can be a cage. The tragedy of the Black family is that they had so much. They had wealth, power, a name that stretched back centuries, and they threw it all away, generation after generation, because they could not let go of the idea that purity mattered more than people. Sirius saw that. He ran from it. He died in the Department of Mysteries, still fighting, still loyal, still the best friend James Potter ever had. He never stopped running, but Regulus saw it too, and he stayed. And he died in a cold, dark cave, alone, with no one to remember him except the brother who had already left. The fandom took that silence, and they filled it with words. They wrote the stories where Regulus and Sirius meet again, in some afterlife, in some dream, in some version of the story where the tapestry is not a curse but a record. They wrote the reconciliation that never happened, and this is where we have to look at the next great expansion of the Marauders universe, because the Black family tapestry does not just end with Regulus. It reaches forward into the next generation, into the story of a boy who was never supposed to exist. We have talked about the Marauders as a group of 4, James, Sirius, Remus, Peter, but the fandom, in its relentless expansion, did not stop there. They looked to the edges of the story. They looked at the people who were mentioned in passing. They looked at the brother of the man who betrayed them all, and they found a new story, a story that would become one of the most powerful, one of the most controversial, one of the most beloved in the entire history of the fandom. That is the story of Regulus Black and James Potter. That is the story of Jegulus. But that is a story for the next chapter. If you've been following along with the story of the Marauders fandom, you've seen how the Black family tapestry became a central thread. The contrast between Sirius's rebellion and Regulus's compliance, the weight of the noble and most ancient house. That chapter set the stage for something that, in the early 2000s, would have seemed almost impossible. It set the stage for the rise of a pairing that has come to define the Marauders fandom in the 2020s more than almost any other, and that pairing is Jegulus, James Potter and Regulus Black. The sudden and massive surge of this pairing in the 2020s is one of the most fascinating phenomena in modern fan fiction history. It's not that James and Regulus were never shipped before. They were. There were whispers of it on early LiveJournal communities and old fan fiction archives. But it was a niche pairing, a quiet one, often seen as a strange cousin to the more dominant Wolfstar. Then, something shifted. The Marauders fandom, which had been quietly growing since the late 90s, suddenly exploded in a new direction. And at the center of that explosion was Jegulus. To understand why, you have to look at the trope that drives it. Fans call it the sun and moon dynamic. James Potter is the sun, bright, golden, warm, the boy who could charm anyone, the Quidditch star, the one who seemed to have everything. Regulus Black is the moon, dark, quiet, reserved, the one who lived in the shadow of his brother, the one who made choices that led him into the depths of a cave, and a locket and a death that was never quite his own. The sun and moon trope is about opposites. It's about the idea that the sun can warm the moon, that the moon can cool the sun. They are two halves of a whole that the universe itself seems to demand. But there's a deeper layer. The enemies to lovers dynamic is what really drives Jegulus. In Canon, James and Regulus are not enemies in the way that James and Severus Snape are. They are rivals. They are on opposite sides of a war that is tearing their world apart. James is a Gryffindor, a rebel, a future member of the Order of the Phoenix. Regulus is a Slytherin, a Black, a boy who was taught from birth that blood purity was everything. The tension between them is not just about schoolyard pranks. It's about ideology. It's about family. It's about the choice to be good when everything around you tells you to be something else. And that's what fans love. They love the idea that James, with all his light, could see something in Regulus that no one else could. They love the idea that Regulus, who was always so careful, so controlled, could let himself be undone by a boy who was loud, so bright, so unapologetically alive. The sun and moon trope gives the framework for that. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about the emotional truth that James represents hope, and Regulus represents the cost of hope. And when you put them together, you get a story that is as much about tragedy as it is about love. But the real reason Jegulus exploded in the 2020s is because of MaraudersTok. TikTok changed the Marauders fandom in a way that no other platform had. It didn't just bring in new readers, it brought in a new demographic. Suddenly, the fandom was full of young creators, teenagers, and early 20-somethings who were making edits, writing threads, and building entire worlds around these characters. The tone shifted. It became more visual, more aesthetic, more focused on the emotional impact of a single line or a single image. And Jegulus was perfect for that. The sun and moon trope is made for TikTok. You can show James in a golden filter, laughing, his glasses catching the light. You can show Regulus in a blue filter, standing in a shadow, his eyes dark and unreadable. You can set it to a song that talks about wanting to be saved, or about wanting to save someone, and in 30 seconds you have a story. That's what MaraudersTok did. It took the complex, multi-chapter fan fiction that had been building for years and distilled it into something that could be felt in a single breath. And that changed the fandom. It made Jegulus not just a ship, but a symbol. It became the ship that represented everything the new Marauders fandom wanted. The idea that you could take two characters from Canon who barely interacted and build a world between them. The idea that you could take the tragedy of Regulus's death and rewrite it, give him a chance to be loved, to be seen, to be something other than a footnote in a war. The idea that James Potter, who in Canon is mostly a memory, a ghost, a father who died too young, could be given a new life, a new love, a new story. The Jegulus revolution is not just about a pairing. It's about what the Marauders fandom has become. It's a fandom that is no longer just about the original four. It's about the whole world of 1970s Hogwarts. It's about the Slytherins, the Gryffindors, the politics, the war, the families. It's about taking a few pages of backstory and turning them into an entire universe. And Jegulus is at the heart of that universe. But there is one story, one fancifiction, that has become the foundation of this entire modern era. It is the story that, more than any other, has shaped how people see James and Regulus, how they see the sun and moon, how they see the tragedy and the hope and the love. That story is called All the Young Judes, and it is the modern Bible of the Marauders fandom. The explosion of Jegulus on social media was only one part of a much larger shift, a tidal wave that crested with a single story. When that wave finally broke, it didn't just wash over the Marauders fandom. It redefined its entire shoreline, and that story arrived in the form of a 500,000-word epic by an author known only as Miss King Bean 89. It was called All the Young Dudes. To understand the impact, you have to understand just how much this story gave to a generation of readers hungry for connection. Before it, the Marauders were a sketch, a few scenes from a memory, a map, a tragic end. But All the Young Judes expanded that sketch into a full, living portrait. It started with Remus Lupin, not as the quiet bookworm we knew, but as a terrified boy in a state-run children's home, shipped off to Hogwarts with nothing but a set of second-hand robes and a secret that would define him. And from that first chapter, readers were hooked. The story followed the four boys from their first year in 1971 all the way through for the horrors of the First Wizarding War, weaving together a narrative that felt not just plausible, but true. Why did this specific story become the new canon for so many? Partly because it filled every gap that the books left open. We never saw Remus's childhood, never knew how he met Lily, never understood the moment when James and Sirius became Animagi. Miss King Bean 89 didn't just invent these scenes. She built them with such careful emotional logic that readers started to forget they weren't J.K. Rowling's words. The characterizations were so sharply drawn that they overrode the original text for many fans. This version of Sirius, brash, reckless, but fiercely loyal, became the default. This version of Remus, anxious, intellectual, hiding behind a cardigan and a constant supply of chocolate, became the image of an entire generation. And the central romance, the slow burn journey of Remus and Sirius, were so heartbreakingly built that Wolfstar went from a niche ship to the central relationship of the entire prequel era. But the phenomenon didn't stop at reading. Fans wanted to own this story. They wanted it on their shelves, next to their worn copies of Harry Potter, so they started binding it themselves. They printed out the chapters, illustrated them, sewed them into proper hardcovers. You could order a custom binding, or you could learn how to do it yourself. On TikTok, on YouTube, creators showed off their personal copies. Thick volumes with dust jackets and fan art and gold foil. It was a statement. This story mattered to them as much as any official book. It was their modern Bible. And when you consider the sheer scale of the work, over 500,000 words, covering 7 years of Hogwarts, multiple wars and decades of aftermath, you start to see why it captured so many hearts. It wasn't just a fan fiction, it was an alternate universe so dense so immersive, that stepping into it felt like coming home. Readers who had never written a word in their lives started writing their own stories, inspired by the depth Miss King Bean 89 had shown them. New fans entered the fandom entirely, through all the young dudes, never having read the original books, but knowing every detail of the Marauders' lives as if they'd lived them. The story also fed the hunger for the 1970s aesthetic that had grown around the Marauders. The bell-bottoms, the vinyl records, the shaggy hair and corduroy jackets. The fiction painted a Hogwarts that felt groovy, gritty, and real. It connected the wizarding world to the Muggle world of the era in a way that previous stories never had. And that aesthetic, that entire sensory world of the 1970s wizarding experience, is what we'll explore next. The fashion, the music, the feeling of being a teenager in a time of war and rebellion. All of it became its own character in the Marauders story. And the most beloved works, the ones that truly reshaped the fandom, were the ones that wrapped you in that world from the very first line. If you have been following along with this series, you know that the story of all the young dudes did more than just popularize a specific pairing or a certain version of Remus Lupin. What that story really did was cement an entire era. It gave the Marauders a soundtrack, and that is what we need to talk about tonight. Because the aesthetic of the 1970s wizarding world is not just a matter of fashion or hairstyles, it is a matter of music. When you think about the Marauders, what do you hear? For a lot of fans, the answer is not the Hogwarts choir or the school song. The answer is David Bowie. It is the raw electric energy of Queen. It is the haunting, almost melancholic harmonies of Fleetwood Mac. And this is not just a random association. This is a deeply deliberate choice that fan fiction writers and fan artists have made to define the vibe of that group of boys. Think about it. James Potter, in the fandom, is often imagined as the golden boy, the one with the swagger and the confidence. And what song fits that better than Queen? There is a reason that the fandom has latched on to the idea of James as a rock star, as someone who would have been blasting Bohemian Rhapsody from the Gryffindor common room. It gives him a kind of bravado that feels right for the character. But it also gives him a layer of vulnerability, because Queen is not just about the bombast, it is about the melancholy underneath. And then you have Sirius Black. Sirius, in the fandom, is the one who is most associated with rebellion, with breaking free from the constraints of his family. And that is where David Bowie comes in. The fandom has very much embraced the idea of Sirius as a Bowie fan, as someone who would have been drawn to the glam rock, the androgyny, the sheer defiance of it all. It is a way of saying that Sirius was not just a rebel against wizarding society. He was a rebel against the very idea of what a person should be. And that is a very powerful, very visual, very musical idea. And then there is Remus. Remus, in the fandom, is often the one who is more quiet, more thoughtful, more introspective. And that is where Fleetwood Mac comes in. There is a reason that so many fan fiction stories, including All the Young Dudes, have Remus listening to Rumours. That album is about heartbreak, about complicated relationships, about the messiness of being young. It is the perfect soundtrack for a boy who is carrying a secret, who is trying to hold his friends together, who is falling in love in a way that he knows is doomed. This is the core of what we call the Muggle-born culture of the fandom. Because in canon, we do not really know what music the Marauders listened to. We do not know if they had a record player in the dormitory. We do not know if they snuck out to see a concert in London. But the fandoms has decided that they did. And the reason is that the Muggle-born characters like Lily Evans are the bridge. They are the ones who would have brought this music into the wizarding world. Lily, in the fandom, is often the one who is most connected to the outside world. She is the one who reminds James and Sirius that there is a world beyond Hogwarts, a world of politics and protests and cultural shifts. And by giving her a love for the music of the 70s, the fandom is doing something very specific. They are saying that the Marauders were not just wizards in a castle, They were teenagers in a very specific moment in history. They were growing up in a time of change, a time when the old rules were being questioned, a time when music was a way of saying that you were not going to be what your parents wanted you to be. This is also why the visual language of the fandom is so important. You have probably seen the fan art. You have probably seen the drawings of James with his messy hair and his round glasses, of Sirius with his leather jacket and his silver chain, of Remus in his cardigan and his second-hand clothes. And you have probably seen the face casting. The fandom has a very specific idea of who these characters look like, and it often comes down to one name: Ben Barnes. Ben Barnes is the actor who has become the face of Sirius Black for a huge portion of the fandom. He played a younger version of the character in a very specific way, and the fandom has latched onto that. But it is not just about the actor, it is about the aesthetic. The fandom has taken the visual cues of the 1970s, the fashion, the hairstyles, the music, and they have built a world around it. They have built a world where the Marauders are not just characters in a book. They are people you could have known. They are people you could have seen in a photograph, in a record store, in a crowd at a concert. And this is what makes the fandom so powerful. Because when you look at the canon, you do not get that. The canon gives you a few pages of backstory. It gives you a few memories. It gives you a map. But the fandom has taken those fragments and built an entire universe. They have built a universe where the music is as important as the magic, where the Muggle world is as important as the Wizarding world, where the tragedy is not just a plot point but a song you can feel in your chest. So, when you think about the Marauders, do not just think about the map. Think about the record player in the Gryffindor common room. Think about the late nights, the arguments, the laughter. Think about the way that a song can become a memory, a way that a chord can become a character, because that is what the fandom has given us. They have given us a world where the boys are not just wizards. They are young, and they are doomed, and they are dancing. And that brings us to a very specific question. Because if the Marauders are defined by their music, by their rebellion, by their love for the Muggle world, then what about the map? What about the pranks? Because the next chapter of this story is going to ask a very difficult question. It is going to ask whether the Marauders were geniuses, or whether they were just cruel. And the answer is not as simple as you might think. We left off last time with the music of the 70s, with the records and the radios that defined the Marauders era. But now, we have to turn to the thing that gave them their name in the first place, the Marauders map. It is in many ways the most brilliant piece of magic to ever come out of a Hogwarts common room. And it's also the most damning piece of evidence we have about what these boys were really like. The map itself is a marvel. It's not just a map of hallways and staircases. It's a living document. It tracks every single person inside the castle, every ghost, every moving suit of armor, every student sneaking out of bed. To create something like that, you need a mastery of magic that goes far beyond what most students ever achieve. James, Sirius, Remus and Peter, they didn't just stumble into this. They spent years on it. They had to learn the homunculus charm, which is a deeply complex piece of magic that allows the caster to track the movement of human beings. They had to map every secret passage, every hidden door, every trick the castle had ever played on a student. And then, they had to encode all of that into a single piece of parchment that would only reveal itself to someone who knew the password. Think about that. Think about the sheer intellectual power it takes. These were teenagers. They were 15, maybe 16 when they finished it. They were still in school, and they created a magical artifact so powerful that it remained undetected for decades. So clever that even the most skilled wizards, the next generation, people like Fred and George Weasley, could only marvel at it. The map is a testament to their genius, but it's also a testament to their cruelty, because the map wasn't just built for exploration, it was built for war. It was built to let them know exactly where their enemies were, exactly when to strike, and exactly how to escape. And the most famous example of that The moment that has haunted this fandom for years is the so-called Snape incident. Let's re-evaluate that moment, because the way it's told in the books is not the way it's lived in the fandom. In the books, it's a prank. It's a funny story. James and Sirius catch Snape sneaking around the Whomping Willow, and they decide to have a little fun with him. They hang him upside down, they threaten to take his pants off, and they leave him there. But in the fandom, that story has been picked apart, examined, and re-examined until it bleeds. Because the truth is, it wasn't just a prank, it was an act of attempted murder. Here's the context that the books don't give you. The Marauders knew that Remus was a werewolf. They knew what he was. They knew that every full moon, he transformed into a creature that could kill them. And they knew that Snape, driven by his own obsessive curiosity, was trying to find out what they were hiding. So when James and Sirius saw Snape following Remus toward the Willow, they didn't just see a rival, they saw a threat. They saw someone who could expose their friend, who could get him expelled, who could destroy their entire world. And so they acted. But the way they acted, the way they chose to humiliate him instead of just stopping him, that's the part that matters. They didn't just tell him to go away. They didn't just warn him. They attacked him. They hung him upside down. They made him a spectacle. And then they left him there, knowing that the full moon was coming, knowing that Remus was about to transform, and knowing that if Snape followed them, he would be dead. That's not a prank. That's a trap. And it's the kind of trap that only works if you're willing to let someone die. The fandom has never been able to agree on this moment. Some people see it as a necessary evil. They see it as James and Sirius protecting their friend, doing whatever they had to do to keep the secret safe. They see it as a hard choice, a cruel choice, but a choice that was made out of love. Other people see it as the beginning of everything. They see it as the moment when the Marauders stopped being heroes and started being bullies. They see it as the moment when James Potter, the man who would become Harry's father, crossed a line that he could never come back from. And that's the tension that drives so much of the Marauders fandom, because you can't separate the genius from the cruelty. The map is a work of art. It's a masterpiece, but it was also a weapon. It was built to let them spy on their enemies, to let them know when the teachers were coming, to let them orchestrate the most elaborate pranks the school had ever seen. And the pranks, the ones that the fandom loves to write about, the ones that turn into whole chapters of fan fiction, they weren't always funny. They weren't always harmless. There's a whole subgenre of Marauders fan fiction that tries to reclaim that moment. It tries to make James and Sirius into heroes. It tries to make the prank into a righteous act of defense. And then there's another subgenre, the one that's more popular in the modern fandom, that tries to make them face it. It tries to make them look at what they did and see the blood on their hands. It tries to make them understand that they were not just the heroes of their own story, they were also the villains. And that's what makes the Marauders so compelling. They are not simple. They are not just the funny boys who made a map. They are the boys who made a map that could have killed someone. They are the boys who spent years learning to become animals. They could keep their friend company, and then spent those same years using that power to terrorize everyone around them. The map is the key. It's the symbol. It's the thing that holds all of their secrets. And when you look at it, when you really look at the way it works, you have to ask yourself, was it genius or was it cruelty? And the answer, the one that the fandom has never been able to agree on, is that it was both. It was always both. That's the story of the Marauders. That's the story that the fan fiction writers have been trying to tell for 20 years. They are brilliant. They are broken. They are funny. They are terrifying. And they are heading toward a war that will destroy them. Because the next chapter, the one that comes after all the pranks and all the maps, is the one where the world outside Hogwarts starts to close in. The next chapter is the one where the first Wizarding War begins. The Marauders map was never just a piece of parchment. And the pranks were never just about getting a laugh. When we talk about the Marauders era, we often get lost in the golden glow of Hogwarts, the torchlit corridors, the midnight escapades, the sheer joy of being young and invincible. But there is a shadow that falls across that entire story, and it begins to creep in long before the final battle. It begins the moment these 4 boys, still barely more than teenagers, graduate from a world of schoolyard rivalries into a world where the wrong secret, the wrong allegiance, could mean death. The transition from school-age pranks to the life and death stakes of the Order of the Phoenix is not a clean line. It is not a single moment where the music stops and the tone shifts. It is a slow, creeping realization that the war they have been hearing about in whispers, the war that has been taking people from the world, is no longer something that happens to other families. It is happening to them. Think about what it means to be 17 or 18 years old and to be asked to join a secret resistance. You are not a soldier in any traditional sense. You have not been trained. You have spent the last 7 years learning how to turn a teapot into a badger and how to brew a potion that makes you laugh for hours. And now, someone is handing you a mission. Someone is telling you that the man whose name you are not supposed to say is building an army, and that you are needed, not wanted. This is the core of what the fandom calls the Lost Generation. It is a term that gets thrown around a lot in Marauders fan fiction, but it carries a weight that is hard to fully grasp unless you sit with it. These are not the heroes of the main story. They are not Harry, born in the aftermath of a prophecy, destined for a final confrontation. They are the ones who came before. They are the ones who fought a war that had no guarantee of victory, who died in a conflict that history books would later reduce to a few paragraphs, who made choices that would echo through the lives of children they would never live to see. And the tragedy of it, the thing that makes fan fiction writers return to this era again and again, is that they were so young. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, they were still in their early 20s when the first Wizarding War reached its peak. They were still figuring out who they were. They were still carrying the Marauders map in their pockets, still using the secret passages they had discovered as children to move through a world that had become suddenly terrifyingly dangerous. The psychological toll of living in a world where anyone could be a spy for Voldemort is not something the books dwell on in detail, but it is the atmosphere that hangs over every fan story set in this period. You cannot trust anyone. That is not a dramatic statement. It is a survival instinct. The war does not work like a Muggle war, with front lines and uniforms and clear sides. It works through infiltration, through fear, through the slow erosion of every bond you thought was solid. The Order of the Phoenix, the original one, was not a large organisation. It was a small group of people who had decided, often at great personal cost, that they would not stand by. They met in secret. They used code names. They lived in constant awareness that a single slip of the tongue, a single moment of misplaced trust, could get them killed, and they were young. That is the part that gets lost sometimes when we talk about the war. We think of it as something that happened to the previous generation, to adults, to people who had already lived their lives. But the truth is that the core of the resistance was made up of people who had barely started. When you read a story like All the Young Dudes, or any of the major fan works that explores period, you feel the weight of that transition. The pranks stop being funny. The map stops being a toy. The Marauders map, that incredible piece of magic they created in their 5th year, becomes something else entirely. It becomes a tool of survival. It becomes a way to know who is in the castle, who is moving through the corridors, who might be listening. The same enchantment that once let them avoid Filch and sneak into the kitchens now lets them avoid Death Eaters. The same magic that was born from mischief is repurposed for war, and that is where the story of the Marauders truly begins to fracture, because not all of them handle it the same way. James Potter throws himself into the fight with the same reckless energy he once used for Quidditch. He becomes a leader a symbol, someone who is willing to stand in front of others. Sirius Black, already estranged from his family, already carrying the weight of a name he has rejected, finds in the Order a new kind of belonging. He fights because he has to, because he knows what his family stands for, and he needs to stand against it. Remus Lupin, who has spent his entire life hiding, who has never been able to fully trust anyone with the truth of what he is, finds himself in a war where his condition is both a liability and a weapon. He is valuable because of what he becomes once a month, but he is also dangerous. And Peter Pettigrew, the smallest, the quietest, the one who always seemed to be following rather than leading, finds himself in a world where the stakes are too high for his comfort. The fandom often focuses on the trio, on James and Sirius and Remus, because their story is the one that feels like a tragedy. But Peter's story is the one that haunts the fandom, because Peter is the one who breaks. He is the one who, when the pressure becomes too much, when the fear becomes too overwhelming, makes a choice that destroys everything. He is the one who betrays them. And the tragedy of Peter Pettigrew is not that he was always a villain. It is that he was once a friend. It is that he was once part of that group, part of that bond, part of that map. And somewhere along the way, the war broke him in a way that the others could not survive. That is the story we will sit with next. The story of the friend who became the traitor. The story of the moment when the Marauders stopped being a group of 4 and became a group of 3 and a ghost. The story of how the First Wizarding War claimed its first casualty long before anyone died. The war had begun in earnest, and the 4 boys who once ruled the corridors of Hogwarts found themselves scattered across a battlefield that had no maps, no secret passages, no pranks that could win the day. James and Lily were married, hiding in a cottage that felt more like a fortress with every passing week. Sirius had broken from his family and thrown himself into the Order with a reckless fury that worried anyone who loved him. Remus moved between safe houses and missions, his condition making him valuable but also vulnerable. And Peter Pettigrew, what was Peter doing? That question is the heart of the tragedy. Because in the vast landscape of Marauders fan fiction, Peter Pettigrew is the hardest character to reconcile. Not Voldemort, not the Death Eaters, not even the darker shades of James and Sirius. Peter is the one who breaks the story from the inside. He is the friend who turned, the one who sat beside them at the Great Hall for 7 years, who memorized the map's every quirk, who knew the way Sirius laughed when he was truly happy, and the way James's glasses fogged up after a long Quidditch match. He knew them, and he sold them. But the fandom's difficulty with Peter isn't just about his betrayal. It's about the slow, grinding resentment that the books only hint at. The feeling of being the fourth wheel, the tag-along, the one who was always just a little slower, a little less brilliant, a little more desperate to belong. In the early years of the Marauders' friendship, Peter wasn't the weak link, he was just the quiet one. But as James and Sirius grew into their power, as they became the undisputed kings of Hogwarts, Peter began to shrink. He was the one who laughed the hardest at their jokes, because he needed to stay in the circle. He was the one who turned into a rat, small, skittering, unnoticed, and that form matched something inside him. He wasn't a stag charging forward. He wasn't a dog bounding ahead. He was the animal that scurries in the shadows, that survives by being overlooked. That survival instinct is what fan fiction often tries to explore. Stories like, or attempt to humanize Peter without excusing what he did. They show the slow build of resentment. The dormitory conversations where James and Sirius forgot Peter was even there. The missions where he was given backup roles, while they took the glory. The growing fear that if he didn't prove his worth, he would be left behind entirely. And when Voldemort rose, when the power balance of the wizarding world shifted, Peter saw a way to be valuable to someone who would never ignore him again. It wasn't a sudden flip. It was 1,000 tiny cracks, 1,000 moments where he chose to feel small instead of brave. But the hardest part for the fandom is that Peter's betrayal wasn't motivated by ideology. He didn't believe in blood purity. or pure-blood supremacy. He believed in Peter Pettigrew. He saw the Dark Lord as a better guarantee of survival than his friends. And that cold calculus is more disturbing than any fanaticism. It's the betrayal of a man who loved the friendship, but loved his own skin more. And that is the tragedy. Peter Pettigrew was never the monster. He was the coward. And cowards are harder to hate, because we all recognise something of them in ourselves. Some fan works try to give Peter a redemption arc, but they rarely succeed because the betrayal is too absolute. He handed over the Potters. He framed Sirius. He spent 12 years as a rat in someone else's house, gnawing on the crumbs of his old life. Even when he had the chance to turn, when Harry reminded him of that debt of life in the basement of Malfoy Manor, he hesitated for a moment, and then the silver hand choked him. The narrative itself seems to say, there is no coming back from this, but the hesitation matters. It shows that somewhere inside him, the boy who ran with the Marauders still existed. He just couldn't find his way back. And that is why this chapter of the fandom story feels so heavy. Because Peter Pettigrew is not a cautionary tale about evil. He is a cautionary tale about small choices, about the slow poison of feeling unseen, about what happens when you let fear win every single time. The Marauders' tragedy is often told through James's death, Sirius's imprisonment, Remus's loneliness, but Peter's tragedy is the one that keeps the fandom up at night. It is the mirror that shows how easily the map can lead you to the wrong place. And as the war presses on, as the Order scrambles for information, and the prophecy trembles on a shelf that no one has yet touched, the question of who to trust becomes everything. The next chapter will explore that paranoia, the prophecy that sealed the fates of two boys, and the way hope itself became a weapon. Because in the end, it wasn't just Peter who broke. It was the entire world that had trusted him. There is a moment in the grand sweep of the Marauders story that feels like a door swinging shut, a click in the dark. It is not loud, not at first. It is a whisper, a prophecy spoken in a dusty room above a pub, and it changes everything. That is the moment we need to sit with, because it is the moment the fate of the four boys is truly sealed, not by a war, not by a betrayal, but by a single breathless prediction from Sybil Trelawney, delivered to a man who was not even supposed to be listening. The story goes that Dumbledore was interviewing Trelawney for the divination post at Hogwarts. It was a formality really, a courtesy, and in the middle of that mundane interview, her eyes went wide and blank, and her voice dropped into something that was not her own. She spoke of the one who would come, born to those who had thrice defied the Dark Lord, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord would mark him as his equal. But he would have power the Dark Lord knows not. It was a prophecy, a real one, and it landed in the ears of a man who had a vested interest in its outcome. That man was Albus Dumbledore, and he knew immediately that the prophecy was about the Potters, about James and Lily and their unborn child. And from that moment on, the Marauders were no longer just a group of friends. They were no longer just the map makers, the pranksters, the boys who ran through the corridors under an invisibility cloak. They became a target. They became the family of the Chosen One. And that changed everything about the trust they had to place in each other. Because here is the thing about a prophecy. It does not just predict the future, it changes the present. It warps the air around it. And in the months that followed, the paranoia began to settle in like a fog. Dumbledore knew that Voldemort would come for the Potters. He knew that the Potters would need to hide, and that hiding would require a secret keeper, and that is where the test of friendship became the ultimate failure. The plan was simple, and it was elegant. The Fidelius charm, one of the most powerful pieces of magic in the wizarding world, would hide James and Lily in plain sight. They would become untraceable, unseeable, as long as their secret keeper held the truth. And the secret keeper had to be someone they trusted absolutely, someone they would die for, someone they would never, ever suspect of handing them over. James chose Sirius. It was the obvious choice. Sirius was his brother in every way that mattered. They had grown up together, fought together, bled for each other. Sirius was the one who had run away from his family, who had chosen the Potters over the Blacks. He was the one who would burn the world down to keep James safe. And James knew that. He knew it in his bones. But then, something shifted. A whisper of doubt, or maybe a whisper of strategy. We do not know exactly who suggested it. But the story goes that the switch was made. James and Lily decided that Sirius was too obvious. He was the loud one, the reckless one, the one everyone knew would be the first to stand in front of a killing curse. And Voldemort, they reasoned, would expect that. He would go after Sirius first, would break him first. So they made a choice. They made Peter the secret keeper. And that is the irony that cuts so deep it still bleeds. Because Sirius, the man who would have died for James, the man who was so fiercely loyal that he could not even imagine betrayal, was the one who was deemed too dangerous to trust. And Peter, the quiet one, the small one, the one who had always been a little bit in the shadow, was the one who was handed the key to the kingdom. Sirius did not just suspect Remus. He did not just suspect Remus. And that is a wound that the fandom has never fully healed. Because if you look at the story, at the way it unfolds, Sirius's paranoia was not aimed at the person who actually betrayed them. He was so certain that the danger would come from the outside, from the werewolf, from the one who had the most to lose if his secret got out. He spent months watching Remus, wondering if he was the spy, wondering if the moon had turned him against them. And all the while, the real threat was sitting in their dormitory, smiling, nodding, agreeing to be the secret keeper. When the switch was made, when Peter became the one who held the secret, it was the ultimate test of friendship, and it was the ultimate failure, because a true friend would have said no. A true friend would have said, I am not strong enough for this. A true friend would have said, I will stand beside you, but I cannot be the one who holds the door. But Peter did not say no. He said yes, and he took the secret, and he waited. The night it all came down, Halloween of 1981, is a night that has been written about 1,000 times. But we have to sit with it just for a moment. The knock on the door, the green light, the sound of a baby crying. And in that moment, the Marauders were not 4 anymore. They were 2. They were 1. They were nothing. Because the prophecy had been fulfilled, and the paranoia had been right. But it had been right about the wrong person. And that is the tragedy that the fandom carries. The knowledge that if James had just trusted Sirius, if he had just let him be the shield he was meant to be, the story might have been different, but he did not. And Sirius spent the next 12 years in Azkaban, knowing that his best friend had died because of a choice he had been a part of. And Remus spent those same years alone, knowing that he had been suspected, knowing that he had been pushed away. And Peter spent those years as a rat, hiding, waiting, knowing that he had traded the lives of his friends for a place at the table. There is a reason the fandom returns to this moment, again and again, because it is the moment where everything breaks. It is the moment where the map stops working, where the corridors go dark, where the laughter stops. And the next chapter, the one that comes after, is the one that changes everything. It is the one that begins with a single date, a single event, a single name that will echo through the rest of the story. It is the end of an era, and it is the beginning of everything else. The prophecy was spoken, and the switch was made. The secret keeper was no longer Sirius Black, but Peter Pettigrew. A decision born from what James believed was pure genius. Hide in plain sight, Sirius had argued. No one would suspect Peter. He is the least likely target, the overlooked one, the loyal friend who never leads a charge. And James, trusting as ever, agreed. That trust, that fatal miscalculation, set the stage for Halloween night in 1981. Godric's Hollow was supposed to be a sanctuary, a cottage tucked away in a Muggle village, protected by the Fidelius charm, its secret buried in the soul of a rat. Inside, Lily was putting Harry to bed. James was probably laughing at something, running his hand through that perpetually messy hair. The house would have smelled like wood smoke and brewing tea. and the quiet comfort of a family who had just survived a war long enough to believe they might see the end. And then the door opened, not with a bang, not with a spell, but with a whispered secret, because the secret keeper himself had led the enemy to the doorstep. Peter Pettigrew, trembling, his heart pounding in his thin chest, handed Lord Voldemort the keys to everything. From Peter's perspective, it was the final act of a long and pathetic surrender. From Sirius's perspective, it was a betrayal so absolute that it would crack his mind wide open. Sirius had not been there. He had been out, performing some task for the Order, or perhaps just taking a night to himself. The details are lost to Canon, but the fandom has filled that gap with 1,000 versions of dread. He arrived too late. He found the cottage in ruins. He saw the bodies. James, crumpled in the hallway, no wand in hand, because he had tried to shield his family. Lily upstairs, fallen across the crib, and Harry, alive, crying. The mark of Voldemort's destruction burned into his forehead. In that moment, Sirius did not grieve. He did not stop. He had one thought: Peter. He had to find Peter. He had to kill him. But Peter was faster, not because he was braver, but because he had already planned his escape. He knew Sirius would come. He knew his old friend would be blinded by rage. And so Peter staged his own death in a crowded Muggle street, killing 12 people with a single blasting curse, leaving his own finger behind as evidence, and transforming into the rat he had always secretly been. He crawled into the sewers and vanished into a shadow that would last 12 years. Sirius was caught moments later. His wand was still in his hand. He was laughing or screaming. No one could tell the difference. The Aurors found him standing over the rubble, covered in dust, his eyes wild, shouting Peter's name. He did not try to explain. What was there to explain? He looked guilty. He sounded guilty. And so he was thrown into Azkaban without a trial, into a cell where the Dementors would feast on his memories of that night, over and over, until the real story was buried under layers of despair and cold. Remus learned the truth from newspapers. He had been on his own mission for the Order, probably tracking werewolf packs or gathering intelligence in the shadows. When the news reached him, James and Lily murdered, Sirius arrested as the traitor, Peter dead. He did not howl. He simply broke. He lost his 3 best friends in one night. One dead, one a murderer, one a victim, and he blamed himself. He had been too weak, too cautious, too willing to let others take risks. He had not guessed Peter's betrayal. He had not stopped Sirius's reckless plan. He was alone, utterly alone, in a world that had no place for a werewolf who had lost his pack. So Remus went into isolation. He stopped answering letters. He moved from shabby flat to shabby flat, taking odd jobs, drinking too much, letting the wolf inside him grow louder. He could not face the boy who survived. Not yet. He could not face the memory of James's laugh or Sirius's defiant smirk. He folded in on himself like a paper flower left in the rain. And Peter, the rat, the betrayer, scurried into anonymity. He found a family of wizards who needed a pet. He became Scabbers. He slept in a boy's pocket, gnawed on old cheese, and listened to the Weasleys talk about the war as if it were history. He let the years wash over him like a slow, comfortable tide. He did not think about Halloween night. He did not think about James's final scream or Lily's last spell. He did not think about anything except survival. Why is October 31st, 1981 the emotional climax of almost every Marauder's story? Because it is the moment when the promise of youth collides with the cruelty of war. Everything the Marauders built, the map, the pranks, the Animagus transformations, the friendship that had survived 7 years of Hogwarts and 3 years of war, all of it collapses in a single evening. The stag dies, the dog goes mad, the wolf retreats, and the rat, the one who seemed so harmless, turns out to have been a predator all along. For the fandom, this date is the wound that never heals. It is the anchor point that gives every prequel story its tragic weight. We know, even as we watch them laugh in the Gryffindor common room, that this is where they are heading. We know that the Marauders era ends not with a grand battle, but with a broken cottage and a screaming child. And what follows is not an epilogue. It is a silence that stretches for 12 years. A silence filled with dementors, with guilt, with a rat sleeping beneath floorboards, and with a lonely werewolf who cannot forgive himself. That silence is its own story, and it begins the moment the last echoes of that Halloween night fade into the scream of a baby who will never know his parents. The next chapter is called The 12 Years of Silence, and it may be the quietest, most painful chapter of all. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The night of October 31st, 1981, shattered everything the Marauders had ever been. Sirius Black was taken to Azkaban without trial. His wand snapped, his voice unheard. Remus Lupin received the news in a cramped flat in a Muggle city, a place he had chosen for its anonymity and its distance from everything he had once loved. The silence that followed was not the peaceful kind. It was the silence of a world that had decided he was no longer part of its story. For 12 years, that silence would stretch across 2 lives, each one a different kind of prison. Let us begin with Remus, because his story after that night is often the one that feels the most invisible. In the immediate aftermath, he had no body to mourn, no grave to visit. James and Lily were gone, buried somewhere he never learned. Sirius was locked away, and Peter Pettigrew was presumed dead. The Order of the Phoenix disbanded almost overnight. His entire support system, the 4 boys who had once been inseparable, had evaporated into thin air, and Remus, the werewolf, was left standing alone in the rubble of a war he had helped fight. The loss went far deeper than friendship. For years, James, Sirius, and Peter had been the only people who knew his secret and accepted him without condition. They had risked their own lives to spend full moons with him, had transformed into animals, so he would not have to face the wolf alone. They had given him a place where the word monster did not apply. Now that place was gone, and worse, the world outside had no intention of offering him a second chance. Remus Lupin was a werewolf, and werewolves were not trusted. In the eyes of the Ministry, in the eyes of many of his former allies, he was a liability at best, a threat at worst. He could not find steady work. Even low-paying jobs evaporated once an employer discovered his condition. He moved from one dilapidated flat to another, taking on temporary, menial labor where no one asked questions. He lived on the fringes of wizarding society, barely scraping by. And yet the worst part was not the poverty. The worst part was the crushing loneliness. There was no one left who understood what he had been through. No one to remind him of the pranks, the map, the hours spent in the common room, laughing until their sides ached. No one to tell him that the war had not been his fault, that James and Lily's death was not something he could have prevented. He began to doubt everything, his worth, his purpose, even his memories. Had those years at Hogwarts really happened, or had he imagined a family that never truly existed? The silence was so complete that sometimes he would speak aloud just to hear a voice, even if it was only his own. Now turn your attention to the other prison, the one beneath the North Sea. Azkaban was not built to hold people like Sirius Black. It was built to break them, and it did. Sirius had been arrested in a state of manic grief, laughing in the street after cornering Peter Pettigrew, only to watch him escape. He had not fought the Aurors. He had simply let them take him. In those first days, he still believed he could prove his innocence. He believed someone would listen. But the Dementors arrived quickly, and they did not care about truth. They fed on every good memory, every moment of happiness, every reason to hope. Sirius had an abundance of joy to lose, and he lost it all. Imagine being trapped in a cell with no window, no warmth, no sense of time passing. The only sounds were the howling of the wind and the whispering of the Dementors outside the door. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Sirius clung to two memories, because they were the only ones the Dementors could not fully strip away. The first was the look on James's face, the day they had become Animagi, the pure, reckless pride of having done something impossible together. The second was the moment he had handed Harry over to Hagrid on that terrible night. The tiny bundle of blankets, the certainty that he had to protect that child. These memories became his anchors in a sea of despair, but they were not enough to keep him sane. The Dementors gnawed at his mind. Over time, Sirius began to lose the distinction between reality and nightmare. He saw James's face in the shadows, heard Lily's voice in the wind, and sometimes he forgot that he was Sirius Black at all. He became a hollow shell, a figure of hatred and madness in the eyes of the world, and yet something survived. Something in him refused to let go completely. It was not hope in any conventional sense. He did not dream of escape or vindication. It was rage. Rage at Peter, rage at himself, rage at the injustice of a system that had condemned him without a trial. That rage kept him alive, even as his mind fractured. And when, after 12 years, he saw Peter's name on a piece of paper, that rage ignited into a single, driving purpose: vengeance. But that is a story for another time. The fandom, of course, has never been content to leave these years blank. The 12 years of silence are a fertile ground for fan fiction, because they are the ultimate gap. A period of utter devastation with almost no canon details. Writers have filled these years with stories of grief and survival, imagining Remus wandering alone through Muggle cities, his only companion a dog that might or might not be Padfoot. They have invented moments of near meeting, letters that were never sent, dreams that crumbled at dawn. There are stories where Remus suspects the truth about Sirius, but cannot act, where Sirius scraps a message into the stone of his cell and hopes someone will find it. There are stories where they survive the silence. Only the horror of Azkaban, the slow erosion of a mind, has been explored in countless ways. The exact texture of a Dementor's touch, the taste of despair, the way a man can become a ghost while still breathing, and Remus's exile, the quiet tragedy of a werewolf who outlived everyone he loved, resonates because it is so understated. No grand battle, no dramatic last stand, just years of holding on, barely. When the silence finally broke, it broke in a railway carriage on a train bound for Hogwarts. But that meeting, that fragile reunion, belongs to the next chapter of this story. The Marauders in the Harry Potter books are about to return, and when they do, everything changes. The 12 years of silence had been a prison for two Marauders, but in very different ways. For Sirius, it was the literal stone walls of Azkaban, a place where happiness was sucked out like the air from a dying lung. For Remus, it was a different kind of confinement, a self-imposed exile where he had to watch the world from the edges, never quite able to step back into the light. And then, in the autumn of 1993, a third-year student named Harry Potter pulled a worn piece of parchment from his pocket, and the silence began to break. When Harry first meets Remus Lupin on the Hogwarts Express, he is struck by something he cannot quite name. The man is shabby, his robes patched and his suitcase held together with string. He looks tired, and not just from a long journey. There is a weariness in his bones, a kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a secret for too long. And when he falls asleep in the carriage, Harry watches him, and he feels a strange pull of recognition. This man, Harry thinks, might understand something about him. This man might know what it is like to be defined by something you did not choose. But it is not until the Shrieking Shack that the full picture comes into focus. The shack stands at the edge of Hogsmeade, a place so cursed that even the most daring students avoid it. The windows are boarded up, the roof sagging, and the whole structure seems to groan under its own weight. And inside on that night, three figures come together in a reunion that is both joyful and devastating. Sirius, gaunt and wild-eyed, has escaped his prison by becoming a dog. Remus, pale and trembling, has been forced to reveal his deepest secret to the boy, who is his last link to the past. And Peter Pettigrew, the rat, the traitor, the one who sold them all, is caught at last. For Harry, this is the moment when the Marauders become real. He has heard the stories, of course. He has seen the photographs of his parents' wedding, the laughing faces of James and Lily. He has heard the whispers about the great and terrible war that took them. But here, in this rotting shack, he sees the living ghosts of that era. He sees the man who was his father's best friend, the man who would have died for James Potter. He sees the man who was his father's other best friend, the man who was supposed to be a protector, and he sees the man who was the fourth, the one who broke everything. The tragedy of this reunion is that Harry never gets to know the real versions of his father's friends. He meets them after the war, after the betrayals, after the years of silence have carved deep lines into their faces. He meets Sirius as a fugitive, desperate and reckless, willing to do anything to prove his innocence. He meets Remus as a man who has learned to live with shame, who cannot quite believe that he deserves a place at the table. He meets them as they are, not as they were, and that is the heart of the Marauders fandom, the thing that makes it so powerful and so painful. We know the ending before we know the beginning, the scars before the smiles. When Harry looks at the Marauders map, he sees the names of his father and his friends. He sees Prongs and Padfoot and Moony and Wormtail. He sees them as they were in the corridors of Hogwarts, sneaking through secret passages, leaving chaos in their wake. And for a moment, he can almost imagine what it must have been like. He can almost hear the laughter, the whispered plans, the thrill of being young and invincible. But the map is a relic of a time that is gone. It is a snapshot of a moment that can never be recovered. And that is the cruelest trick of the Marauders. They are presented to us as a unit, in a family. But by the time we meet them, the family is broken. The bonds that held them together have been twisted and torn. James is dead. Sirius is a fugitive. Remus is a werewolf. Peter is a traitor. And the only thing that remains is the map, a piece of parchment that shows the way, but cannot show the way back. The bittersweet reunions in the Shrieking Shack are a masterclass in what the Harry Potter books do best. They take a moment of triumph and turn it into a moment of loss. Sirius and Remus are together again. They have found each other after 12 years of silence. But the reunion is not a celebration. It is a confrontation. It is a reckoning with all the things that went wrong. And when Harry watches them, he sees two men who are trying to hold on to something that is already slipping away. Sirius in particular is a tragedy. He is the man who should have been the hero. He is the one who broke free from his family, who chose the side of light, who stood by his friends until the very end. But he is also the man who was caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, who was sent to Azkaban without a trial, who spent 12 years in a cell with nothing but his own guilt. And when he meets Harry, he sees a chance to make things right. He sees a chance to be the father figure he never got to be, but he is too damaged, too desperate, too haunted by the ghosts of the past. Remus too is a study in what could have been. He is the wise one, the careful one, the one who always tried to do the right thing, but he is also the one who was too afraid to act, who let his fear of being found out keep him from the people who needed him most. And when he meets Harry, he sees a boy who is carrying the same weight he once carried. He sees a boy who is defined by something he did not choose, and he wants to help, but he does not know how. The tragedy of Harry never getting to know the real versions of his father's friends is that he is left with fragments. He has the map, he has the stories, he has the memories of people who knew them, but he does not have them. He cannot sit with them and ask them what it was like to be young. He cannot laugh with them about the time they pulled a prank on Snape. He cannot mourn with them for the loss of a friend. He is left with the aftermath, the echoes, the shadows. And that is what the Marauders fandom has tried to fill. The gaps in the canon are not just gaps in the story, they are gaps in the heart. We want to know what it was like to be in that dormitory, to hear the whispered plans, to see the first time Remus trusted his friends with his secret. We want to know the moments of joy before the moments of sorrow. We want to know the laughter before the tears. The Marauders in the Harry Potter books are a promise that is never fully kept. They are a door that is open just a crack, showing us a glimpse of a world that is bright and beautiful and full of possibility. But then the door is closed, and we are left on the outside, looking in, and the only way to get through is to imagine, to write, to create. As we move toward the end of this story, we have to confront the hardest truth of all. The Marauders are not just a group of friends. They are a symbol of something that was lost. They are a reminder that even the strongest bonds can be broken, and when the last Marauder falls, when the final member of that foursome meets their end, we are left with nothing but the map, nothing but the memory, nothing but the hope that one day we might find our way back. The next chapter is called The Death of the Last Marauder, and it is the moment when the story of the Marauders comes to its final, inevitable close. It is the moment when the last of the four, the one who was always the most careful, the most cautious, the most afraid, finally makes a choice that changes everything. And it is the moment when we have to say goodbye. The Shrieking Shack reunion was, in many ways, the last full gathering of the Marauders as you once knew them. There, in the dim, dusty chaos of that abandoned house, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin stood together again, side by side, their wand hands steady, their old camaraderie flickering through the years of silence and suspicion. But that moment did not last. It could not last, because the story of the Marauders was always a tragedy told in 4 acts, and each act ends with a death. Let us walk through those endings now, in the order they came. The first, the most shattering, was James Potter. On the night of October 31st, 1981, James died in his own home at Godric's Hollow, wandless, unarmed, trying to buy time for Lily and Harry. He was 21 years old. There is no grand battle scene, just a door blown off its hinges, a flash of green light, and then silence. The stag, prongs, fell before he could even shift. That death set the entire chain in motion. It sent Sirius to Azkaban. It drove Remus into exile, and it turned Peter Pettigrew into a rat, literally and figuratively, for 12 long years. The second death came in the Department of Mysteries, in June of 1996. Sirius Black fell through the veiled archway, laughing, his eyes still bright, with the joy of fighting beside his godson. That laugh was the last sound he made. One moment he was there, dodging a curse from his own cousin Bellatrix, and the next he was gone, the veil rippling behind him like a curtain drawn across an exit that cannot be reopened. Remus had to hold Harry back from following, and in that instant, the Marauders lost their second member. Hadfoot was gone, leaving only Moony and Wormtail, and one of them had already betrayed the others long before. The third death was Peter Pettigrew, the quietest, the strangest, the most pitiful. It happened in a cellar in Malfoy Manor during the spring of 1998. Peter cornered, his silver hand choking him for a moment of hesitation, finally chose to spare Harry. That moment of mercy was his undoing. The hand Voldemort had given him turned on him, and Peter died the way he had lived, small, afraid, and too late to make a difference. The fandom often struggles with Peter. He is the hardest to mourn, but his death was still a death, and it left only one Marauder standing. That last Marauder was Remus Lupin, and his death came at the Battle of Hogwarts, on the night of May 2nd, 1998. Remus and his wife Nymphadora Tonks fought side by side in the final stand against Voldemort's forces. They died together, which is both merciful and agonizing. Remus was 39 years old. His body was found among the rubble of the castle, not far from where Tonks lay. Their son Teddy was left an orphan just as Harry had been, and with Remus's death, the Marauders were no more. The Battle of Hogwarts carries an immense symbolic weight, because it closes the chapter of the Marauders entirely. That war had begun with the death of James and Lily Potter, and it ended with the death of Remus Lupin, the last link to that Hogwarts friendship of the 1970s. When the sun rose over the ruined castle on May 3rd, the 4 boys who had once run through the corridors as Prongs, Padfoot, Moony and Wormtail were all gone. The Marauders map, now passed to Harry, still showed their names in the margins, but those names would never move again. Yet the fandom refuses to let the story end with their deaths. Why? Because these characters were given so little page time, and yet their lives left such a deep, emotional imprint. Readers fell in love with the idea of them before they knew the full tragedy. Fan fiction steps in to rewrite the ending. It gives Remus a peaceful old age. It lets Sirius escape through the veil into another dimension. It imagines a world where Peter chose differently, where James survived that night, where the Marauders grow old together, bickering over Quidditch scores and raising their children. The fandom's refusal to accept their deaths is not denial. It is a form of love. It is the desire to keep that found family alive, to give them the happiness they were never allowed in canon. And from that desire, the fandom expanded outward. The Marauders themselves became a gateway to an entire generation of side characters. Characters who were barely mentioned in the books, but now carry whole Fanon histories. That is where the story turns next, toward the Slytherin Skittles and the other forgotten faces of the 1970s Hogwarts world. Because if the Marauders cannot live, then at least the world they inhabited can be built, room by room, line by line, in the hearts of those who love them. The last Marauder fell at the Battle of Hogwarts, and with him, the final thread of that original foursome was severed. But the story of the Marauders as a fandom did not end with Remus Lupin's last breath. In fact, in many ways, that was only the beginning of something far larger. The fandom that had grown from a few scattered pages in a children's book began to expand its borders, reaching beyond the 4 Gryffindor boys and into the wider world of Hogwarts in the 1970s. And it is here, in this expansion, that we find some of the most fascinating and creative work the fandom has ever produced. You see, once the original Marauders had been fully explored, once their tragic arcs had been written and rewritten and wept over, the fandom needed more. It needed new characters to love, new stories to tell, new faces to populate the hallways of that imagined Hogwarts. And so, the fandom turned its attention to the names that had been little more than footnotes in the original books. Names like Pandora Lovegood, Dorcas Meadows, Marlene McKinnon. These were not characters with rich backstories in the canon. They were ghosts, barely mentioned, often only existing as a name on a list of the dead or a brief mention in a parent's memory. But in the hands of the Marauders fandom, they became fully realised people. Pandora Lovegood is a fascinating case. In the original books, she is only ever known as Luna's mother, a woman who died in a spell experiment when Luna was 9. That is all we get. A tragic accident, a lost parent, a daughter with a strange and beautiful way of seeing the world. But the fandom, particularly in the modern Marauders era, took that single sentence and built an entire life around it. Pandora became a witch of extraordinary creativity, a woman who saw the world in a way that no one else could. She was often portrayed as a friend of the Marauders, sometimes a contemporary of theirs at Hogwarts, and she was given a personality that was both whimsical and deeply intelligent. She became a symbol of the kind of magic that is not about power or control, but about understanding and connection. Her death, in the fandom's hands, became not just a tragedy, but a loss of a particular kind of light in the world. And her relationship with her daughter, with Xenophilius, with the very concept of seeing things differently, became a cornerstone of many fan works. Then there is Dorcas Meadows. In the original books, Dorcas is a name on the list of the original Order of the Phoenix members. We know she was killed by Voldemort himself. That is it. That is the entirety of her canon existence. But in the fandom, Dorcas became so much more. She became a character of quiet strength, of fierce loyalty, of a kind of bravery that did not need to be loud. She was often written as a close friend of the Marauders, sometimes as a member of their extended circle, and she was given a backstory that explored the toll of the First Wizarding War on those who fought in the shadows. Her death, which is so casually mentioned in the books, became a moment of profound grief in fan fiction. It became a loss that the Marauders had to carry, a reminder of the cost of their fight. And in some of the most popular modern works, Dorcas was given a relationship with Marlene McKinnon, a pairing that became known as Dorleen, and that relationship added a layer of depth and humanity to both characters that the canon never even hinted at. And Marlene McKinnon, she is another name from the Order of the Phoenix list, another victim of the war. In the books, we know that Marlene and her entire family were killed. That is the sum total of her story. But in the fandom, Marlene became a character of vibrant energy, of fierce independence, of a kind of Gryffindor courage that was not about being reckless, but about being willing to stand up for what was right. She was often written as a friend of Lily Evans, as a contemporary of the Marauders, and she was given a personality that was both warm and sharp. Her death, the slaughter of her entire family, became one of the most haunting moments in the fandom's version of the war. It became a symbol of how the conflict touched everyone, how it did not discriminate, how it took entire families in a single night. And in the hands of the fandom, Marlene became a character who was mourned, was remembered, who was given a life and a voice that the canon had denied her. This expansion, this giving of life to the dead, is one of the most important things that the Marauders fandom does. It takes the minor names, the footnotes, the casualties, and it makes them people. It gives them birthdays and favourite foods, and secret fears and hidden hopes. It gives them relationships and friendships and rivalries. It gives them love, and in doing so, it creates a world that feels real, a world that feels lived in, a world that feels like it could have existed just beyond the edges of the pages we read as children. But there is another layer to this expansion, one that is deeply important to the modern Marauders fandom. It is the question of representation. The original books, for all their magic and wonder, were not particularly diverse. They were set in a largely white, largely British, largely heterosexual world. And the Marauders fandom, particularly in the 2020s, has made a conscious and deliberate effort to change that. The characters who are being fleshed out, the side characters who are being given new lives, are often being written with diverse backgrounds and identities. Pandora Lovegood is sometimes written as a woman of colour. Dorcas Meadows is often written as a woman of colour. Marlene McKinnon is often written as a woman of colour. And their relationships, the ships that have become so popular, are often same-sex relationships. Dorcas and Marlene, Pandora, and in some works other characters. The fandom is not just expanding the story, it is expanding the world. It is making Hogwarts look more like the world we actually live in. It is making the 1970s, the era of war and loss and love, feel more inclusive, more representative, more true. And this is not just a matter of checking boxes. This is a matter of giving readers and viewers and fans characters they can see themselves in. For a long time, the Marauders fandom was dominated by stories about 4 white boys. And that is fine. That is the canon. That is what we have. But the fandom has grown, and it has realised that there is room for more. There is room for stories about women, about people of colour, about queer characters, about all the people who were left out of the original narrative. And by taking these minor names, these footnotes, these ghosts, and giving them full lives, the fandom is doing something that the original books never did. It is saying that everyone matters. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves to be seen. And so the Marauders fandom, which began with 4 boys in a dormitory, has become a sprawling, diverse, inclusive universe. It has become a place where the dead are given life, where the forgotten are remembered, where the marginalised are centred. It has become a testament to the power of fan fiction to not just tell stories, but to build worlds. And as we look at this world, as how it has grown and changed and evolved, we begin to see the shape of the next wave, the next chapter, the next era of this fandom. Because the story is not over, it is just beginning to find its voice in a new generation. And that is where we will turn next, to the world of MaraudersTok New Wave, where the fandom is being born again, on a new platform, for a new audience, with new stories to tell. We ended the last chapter by exploring how the fandom took minor characters like Dorcas Meadows, and Marlene McKinnon and turned them into fully realised icons. But that expansion was just one symptom of a much larger shift. The Marauders fandom, as we know it today, didn't really explode until it found a new home. A home that wasn't on fanfiction forums or in the comments sections of old archive sites. It found a home on a platform that moves at the speed of a 15-second video. This is the story of MaraudersTok and the new wave. Short-form video content didn't just make the Marauders popular again. It created an entirely new visual language for the fandom. Before TikTok, if you wanted to talk about the Marauders, you had to write. You had to describe the texture of the velvet curtains in the Gryffindor common room. You had to explain the exact shade of James Potter's messy black hair. You had to build the world from scratch, word by word. But on TikTok, the world is built in seconds. A single clip of a sad-eyed actor can become Sirius Black. A quick shot of two boys laughing in a hallway can become James and Remus. A song can become the entire soundtrack to a decade of their lives. This is what created the phenomenon of the POV video. The point of view video became the most powerful tool in the Marauders fandom's arsenal. You would see a video, usually set to a melancholic or dramatic song, and the caption would read something like, "POV, you are Remus Lupin, and it is the night before the full moon," or "POV, you are watching your best friends become Animagi for you." These videos weren't just stories, they were invitations. They were a way to step directly into the shoes of a character who, in the books, only existed in memory and fragments. And this is where the gamification of Marauders lore began. The lore itself became a kind of game. You had to know the beats. You had to know that James and Sirius became Prongs and Padfoot. You had to know that Remus was a werewolf. You had to know that the Marauders map was their greatest creation. But more than that, you had to know the Fanon. You had to know that Wolfstar was real. You had to know that Regulus Black was more than just a footnote. You had to know that the entire 1970s Hogwarts era was a fully realised world. Even though the books only gave you a few pages of it, the game was this. Can you piece together the entire story from a 15-second video? Can you understand the tragedy of Sirius Black's life just from a single clip of a man looking at a window? Can you feel the weight of Remus Lupin's loneliness just from a shot of a full moon? The fandom became a shared language, a visual shorthand that only those who were deep in the lore could fully understand. But this created a tension, a very real, very palpable tension between the old fandom and the new fandom. The old fandom was book-based. It was built on the pages of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. It was built on the careful, slow reading of the chapters where Sirius Black first appears, where Remus Lupin's backstory is revealed, where the Marauders map is finally explained. The old fandom knew every line. They knew that Sirius Black was the first person to ever give Harry a proper birthday present. They knew that Remus Lupin was the kindest, most gentle teacher Harry ever had. They knew the canon. The new fandom, the TikTok-based fandom, didn't always know the canon. They knew the aesthetic. They knew the tragedy. They knew the ships. They knew that Jegulus, the pairing of James Potter and Regulus Black, was a powerful, heartbreaking story. They knew that Wolfstar was the ultimate love story, but they didn't always know that these ships were almost entirely fan-created. They didn't always know that the books never once hinted at a romantic relationship between Sirius and Remus. They didn't know that Regulus Black was only mentioned in passing, as the brother who died trying to destroy a Horcrux. This is where the friction lived. The old fans would see a video of a young man with long black hair, and they would say, "That's not Sirius. Sirius has short hair in the books." The new fandom would see the same video and say, "But this is how I feel him. This is the emotion. This is the vibe." And the two sides, the book-based and the TikTok-based, would clash. They would argue in the comments. They would argue in the forums. They would argue about what was real and what was made up. But here is the truth. Both sides were right. The old fandom was right to hold onto the canon. The books are the foundation. The new fandom was right to build on top of that foundation. They were right to see the Marauders as a lost generation, as a group of boys who deserved more than a few pages of backstory. They were right to give them a visual language. They were right to give them a soundtrack. And this brings us to a very important question, a question that the next chapter will have to answer. When the fandom creates so much, when the stories become so big, when the ships become so real, where does the line between Canon and Fanon actually sit? Is it a hard line? Is it a soft line? Or is it something else entirely? The tension between the old fandom and the new fandom is not a war. It is a conversation. It is a conversation about how we tell stories, about how we remember people, about how we take a few pages of a book and turn them into an entire world. And that conversation, the one about the ethics of Fanon versus Canon, is exactly where we are heading next. There is a tension that lives at the very heart of every fandom, but it is particularly sharp when it comes to the Marauders. It is the quiet, often unspoken war between what is written and what is imagined, between the canon, the official story, and the Fanon, the collective reimagining. And in this fandom, that war has become something more than just a disagreement over details. It has become a debate over whether we are honouring these characters, or, in a very real sense, assassinating them. The term character assassination is a heavy one, and it gets thrown around a lot in fan fiction spaces. It usually means that a writer has taken a beloved figure and twisted them into something unrecognisable, something that feels like a betrayal of the source material. But here, in the Marauders fandom, the accusation is more complex, because the source material itself is so thin. The canon gives us a few scattered pages, a handful of memories, a couple of lines of dialogue from a dying man, and from that tiny foundation, the fandom has built an entire world. So when does the building become a demolition? When does the act of creation cross over into the act of destruction? That is the question that haunts this chapter, and it is a question with no easy answer. Let us look at the most famous example, the character of Remus Lupin, as written by J.K. Rowling. Is a man of profound restraint. He is kind, yes, but he is also cautious. He is a prefect, a rule follower, a man who spends his entire life trying to control the beast inside him. He is gentle, but he is also distant. He keeps secrets. He pushes people away. He is in many ways the most tragic of the Marauders, because he is the one who survives, and survival for him means a lifetime of quiet loneliness. But the Fanon version of Remus, especially in the modern Marauders fandom, is often very different. He is soft. He is vulnerable. He is a victim. He is the heart of the group, the one who holds them together, the one who is endlessly loved and endlessly protected. The Wolfstar ship, the relationship between Remus and Sirius, has become so central to the fandom that for many, it is the defining story of the entire era. And that is a beautiful story, a compelling one, but it is also one that the canon does not support. In the books, Remus and Sirius are friends. They are brothers in all but blood, but there is no evidence of a romantic relationship. There is no hint of it. And yet, for a huge portion of the fandom, that relationship is as real as anything in the novels. It is the foundation upon which the entire 1970s era is built. So when someone says that the Fanon has committed a character assassination against Remus, they are not saying that the Fanon is wrong. They are saying that the Fanon has replaced the original. And this is where the debate gets really interesting, because it is not just about Remus. It is about every single character in this small, precious group. It is about James Potter, who in the canon is a bit of a bully, a bit of a show-off, a boy who grows up but who starts as a brash, arrogant kid. In the Fanon, he is often a golden retriever of a man, a loyal, loving, perfect friend. It is about Sirius Black, who in the canon is reckless and dangerous and deeply damaged. In the Fanon, he is often a tortured soul, a romantic hero, a man whose pain is beautiful. It is about Peter Pettigrew, who in the canon is a coward and a traitor. In the Fanon, he is often a lost boy, a victim of circumstance, a tragedy waiting to happen. The Fanon takes these characters and it smooths out their edges. It makes them more sympathetic. It makes them more lovable. and that is not necessarily a bad thing. It is a natural human impulse to want to protect the people we love, but the question remains, when does that protection become a distortion? The answer, I think, lies in the concept of the lost generation. These characters are not just characters, they are ghosts. They are the parents Harry never knew. They are the friends who died before the story began. And because they are ghosts, we can only see them through the lens of the people who survived them. James through the eyes of his son, Sirius through the eyes of his godson, Remus through the eyes of his wife. And those lenses are all coloured by grief. So when J.K. Rowling made her later comments about these characters, the ones that so often clash with the fandom's interpretations, she was not just adding to the canon, she was in a way taking a stance. She was saying that James was not a perfect man, that he was a bit of a bully, that he grew up, but that he started as a kid who had some growing to do. She was saying that Sirius was not a perfect hero, that he was reckless, that he was impulsive, that he made terrible choices. And she was saying that Remus was not a perfect victim, that he was a man who made his own choices, who chose to keep secrets, who chose to walk away. And those comments, those later clarifications, they felt like a betrayal to the fandom, because the fandom had already built a different version, a version where James was a saint, a version where Sirius was a martyr, a version where Remus was a gentle soul who deserved only love. And when the author herself said something different, it created a rift between the canon and the Fanon that has never fully healed. This is the ethics of it. This is the heart of the debate. Because fan fiction is not just a hobby, it is an act of ownership. It is a way of saying, this story is mine too. I have a right to it. And when a fandom grows so large, so powerful, that its version of a character becomes more popular than the original, that is not just a creative choice, it is a cultural shift. And it is a shift that has consequences, because the Fanon version of these characters is not just a version, it is a standard, it is a lens through which new readers, new fans, new viewers see the original story. And when they go back to the books, they are often disappointed, they are often confused. They find a James who is not as perfect as they imagined. They find a Sirius who is not as romantic as they hoped. They find a Remus who is not as soft as they believed. And that disappointment, that confusion, it is the real cost of the Fanon. It is the moment when the Fanon becomes so prevalent that it eclipses the source material. And it is not a bad thing. It is not a wrong thing. But it is a thing that we have to be honest about. Because the Marauders Fandom is not just about the Marauders anymore. It is about the world they left behind. It is about the 1970s Hogwarts that the fandom has built from scratch. It is about the Slytherin Skittles, the minor characters, the side characters, the ones who were barely mentioned in the books, but who have become icons in their own right. It is about the ships, the aesthetics, the playlists, the art. It is a whole universe. And in that universe, the canon is just a starting point. It is a suggestion. It is a foundation. But the Fanon is the house. And the question is, who gets to decide what that house looks like? I think the answer is that we all do. Every writer, every reader, every fan, we all get a vote. But we also have to live with the consequences of our votes. We have to live with the fact that the version of these characters we love is not the version that was written, and that is okay. That is the magic of fan fiction. But it is also the burden. Because when we love a version of a character that is not real, we are not just loving a story, we are loving a ghost. And ghosts, as we know, are hard to let go of, which brings us to the next chapter, the one where we ask the hardest question of all, why we cannot let go, why the Marauders Fandom, despite all its contradictions, despite all its debates, despite all its ethical dilemmas, remains so impossible to walk away from. That is the story of chapter 26, and it is a story that is still being written. The previous chapter explored the tension between canon and fanon, the debate over whether fan fiction can be a form of character assassination when it overwrites the original text. But that debate only scratches the surface. of why we keep coming back to this story. It's not just about accuracy or respect for the source material. It's about what the Marauders represent on a much deeper level, and why we simply cannot let go of them. There is something almost universal in the way this fandom grips its readers. The Marauders are not just a group of characters from a book series. They are a symbol of something we all recognize, something we have all lived through in one form or another. The themes that drive their story are the themes that drive our own lives. Friendship, the kind that feels like it could last forever, forged in the chaos of adolescence. Betrayal, the kind that shatters everything you thought you knew about someone. And the loss of innocence, the moment when the world becomes a little bit darker and you realize that not every story has a happy ending. These are the universal threads that run through the Marauders narrative. When you read about James and Sirius and Remus and Peter, you are not just reading about 4 boys at a magical school. You are reading about the process of growing up. You are reading about the bonds that form when you are young and naive and believe that nothing can ever break you apart. And then you are reading about the slow, inevitable unraveling of those bonds, the choices that lead to heartbreak, the secrets that destroy trust, the war that claims everything. And that is where the what-if factor comes in. Because the Marauders story, as told in Canon, is a tragedy. It is a story of loss. It is a story of death and betrayal and the end of an era. But the fandom has given us something else. It has given us the endless appeal of the alternate universe, the everyone lives universe. The what if that asks, what if Peter had never turned? What if Sirius had never gone to Azkaban? What if James and Lily had survived that night? What if Remus had never lost his friends to the war? These questions are not just wish fulfillment. They are a way of processing grief. They are a way of holding on to the people we have lost. Even if those people are fictional, the Everyone Lives AU is not just a genre of fan fiction. It is a coping mechanism. It is a way of saying, this story does not have to end in pain. This story can be different. This story can be a place where we heal. And that is why the Marauders fandom has become such a safe space for so many people. It is not just about the characters. It is about what those characters represent. The Marauders are a group of people who are broken. They are a group of people who have experienced trauma. They are a group of people who are trying to find their way through a world that does not always make sense. And when you read about them, when you write about them, you are not just exploring their story, you are exploring your own. The fandom serves as a space where identity can be questioned and redefined, where trauma can be examined and understood, where the things that hurt you can be placed into a narrative and given a different ending. The Marauders are not just a group of friends from a book. They are a mirror. They are a way of looking at your own life and saying, I am not alone in this. Other people have felt this way. Other people have lost this much. Other people have had to choose between loyalty and survival. And that is why we cannot let go. Because the Marauders are not just a story. They are a part of us. They are a part of the way we understand friendship and betrayal and the loss of innocence. They are a part of the way we ask ourselves, what if things had been different? What if we had made different choices? What if the people we loved had not been taken from us? The what if is not just a question, it is a lifeline. It is a way of holding on to hope in a world that often feels like it is falling apart. And the Marauders fandom has given us that hope. It has given us a way to imagine a world where everyone lives, where everyone gets a second chance, where the map does not just show the way through the castle, but the way through the pain. The legacy of the Marauders is not just about the map they created, it is about the map we create for ourselves. The map that helps us find our way back to each other. A map that reminds us that, even in the darkest times, there is still a path forward. And that is the legacy we carry with us. That is the legacy of the map. We've spent so many chapters now tracing the threads of this fandom, watching it grow from a few scattered pages of backstory into a sprawling universe of its own. And in the last chapter, we talked about why we can't let go, the pull of those what-if worlds, the desire to see these characters live and thrive instead of meeting their tragic ends. But that desire, that need to hold on to them, has done something remarkable. It has built a community that has, in many ways, outgrown the very story that gave it life. Think about that for a moment. The Marauders Fandom is no longer just a subset of the larger Harry Potter fandom. It has become its own entity, with its own culture, its own language, and its own traditions. And at the heart of all of this, there is a single, enduring symbol that ties it all together. It's not just a name. It's not just a piece of magic. It's a phrase that has become a rallying cry, a signature, a promise, mischief managed. Those two words, spoken at the end of a long night of pranks and secrets, have taken on a life far beyond the map itself. In the fandom, they represent the spirit of the Marauders. They represent the joy of breaking rules for the right reasons, of finding your people, of creating something that matters. And this fandom has created something that matters. It has created a world. The community aspect of the Marauders fandom is one of its most defining features. It is not a passive fandom. It is not a fandom that simply consumes what is given. It is a fandom that builds. It is a fandom that writes and draws and edits and creates. And one of the most beautiful ways this has manifested is through the rise of signs. These are not just collections of fan art or fan fiction. They are artifacts of a shared passion. They are lovingly crafted, often printed in limited runs, and they bring together dozens of artists and writers to create a single cohesive vision of the Marauders world. There is something deeply special about a zine. It is a tangible piece of the fandom. It is a book that you can hold in your hands, filled with illustrations that capture the exact moment James and Sirius first became friends, or the quiet sadness of a full moon in the Shrieking Shack. It is a collection of stories that explore the tiny, unspoken moments between classes, or the weight of a secret kept for years. These zines are labours of love. They are proof that the Marauders fandom is not just a collection of people who like the same thing. It is a community of creators who want to give something back. And then there are the conventions, the gatherings, the places where this community becomes real. You might think of a fan convention as a place for celebrities and autographs, but the Marauders fandom has its own kind of conventions. They are smaller, more intimate, often focused entirely on the world of the 1970s at Hogwarts. They are places where you can find panels on the ethics of Animagus transformation, or workshops on how to write a believable Remus Lupin. They are places where you can meet the person who wrote your favourite fan fiction, or the artist who drew the portrait of the Marauders that hangs in your imagination. These conventions are a celebration of the fandom's collaborative spirit, because at their core, the Marauders fandom is a collaborative project. It is a massive, ongoing, ever-evolving story that is written by thousands of hands. There are collaborative writing projects where dozens of authors will take a single premise and build a world around it. There are role-playing games where people step into the shoes of these characters and live out their school years in real time. There are shared timelines and shared headcanons and shared understandings of what this world looks like. And this is where the fandom has truly outgrown the original series. Because the original series gave us a few key facts. It gave us the names, the dates, the broad strokes of a tragedy. But the fandom has given us the details. It has given us the texture. It has given us the feel of a cold morning in the Gryffindor common room, the smell of a butterbeer in Hogsmeade, the sound of laughter echoing through the corridors at night. It has given us a fully realised world, one that is as rich and as complex as the one we read about in the books. The fandom has also given us a sense of ownership. The Marauders are not just characters anymore, they are ours. We have shaped them. We have given them new loves, new losses, new lives. We have taken the small, tragic pieces of their story, and we have woven them into something vast and beautiful. And this is not a theft. It is not a corruption of the original. It is an expansion. It is a testament to the power of a story that leaves room for its readers to dream. And that is why Mischief Managed will always be more than just a catchphrase. It is a declaration. It is a statement that says, we have done what we set out to do. We have explored every corner. We have found every secret. We have made our mark. And now the map is ours. The legacy is ours. The Marauders Fandom has built something that will last. It has built a community of people who understand that a story does not end when the last page is turned. It ends when the last person stops telling it. And this fandom is not done telling. It is still writing. It is still creating. It is still gathering in convention halls and online forums, sharing their visions of a world that never was, but that feels so real it might as well be. As we look toward the final chapter of this documentary, we have to ask ourselves one last question. What happens when the story is complete? What happens when the map is finally full? When every secret has been uncovered? When every moment has been written? The answer, of course, that the story never ends. It simply changes. It becomes something new. It becomes the story of the people who loved it. And that is a story that will be told for as long as there is someone willing to say, Mischief Managed. And so we find ourselves at the end of our journey, standing on the threshold of a story that in truth never really ends. We've traced the path from a few scattered pages in a children's book to a sprawling universe of fan art, zines, and midnight conversations. We've watched as a generation of readers took the names of four boys, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, and turned them into something far larger than the sum of their canon parts. But the question that lingers, the one that hangs in the air like smoke from a dying candle, is this: why does this era, this tiny sliver of time between 1971 and 1978, remain the most vibrant corner of the entire Harry Potter fandom? The answer, I think, lies in the very nature of the story itself. The Marauders era is a paradox. It is a world built on a foundation of almost nothing, yet it has grown into a cathedral of imagination. The canon gives us a handful of moments, a map, a nickname, a secret, a betrayal. It gives us a photograph of four boys laughing in a corridor, and it gives us the weight of everything that came after. But it is the gaps, the spaces between those moments that have become the true playground, and that is the secret. The Marauders fandom is not a fandom of completion. It is a fandom of possibility. Think about what you know. You know that James Potter was a star on the Quidditch pitch, that he had a habit of messing his hair, that he was a bully to one boy and a hero to another. You know that Sirius Black ran away from a house of shadows and found a family in a dormitory. You know that Remus Lupin carried a secret inside him that was not just a curse, but a lesson in loneliness. And you know that Peter Pettigrew, the smallest of them, the one who always seemed to be in the background, chose a path that would echo through the decades. But you do not know the shape of their laughter. You do not know the sound of their footsteps in the dark, or the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. And so you imagine. And that act of imagining is the cycle that never ends, because every new reader who opens the pages of The Prisoner of Azkaban for the first time, every young mind that sees the Marauders map and wonders about the hands that drew it, is drawn into that same space. They are given the same fragments, the same hints, and they are invited to fill in the rest. The fandom is not a static thing. It is a living, breathing organism that grows with each new generation. The 1970s, as they are lived in fan fiction, are not a fixed decade. They are a mirror. Each new wave of writers, each new wave of readers looks into that mirror and sees something different. In the early 2000s, the Marauders were a footnote, a tragic backstory to be explored in the margins of the main story. The focus was on the war, on the loss, on the weight of knowing what was coming. But then came the 2020s, and with it, a new wave. The rise of MaraudersTok, the explosion of short-form video, the visual language of aesthetic and mood. Suddenly, the 1970s were not just a backdrop. They were a setting. They were a place to live. The fandom began to treat the era as a fully realized world, with its own fashion, its own music, its own politics, The characters were no longer just tragic figures waiting for their end. They were teenagers. They were messy, complicated, alive, and that is the key. The Marauders fandom is not about the tragedy, though the tragedy is always there, a shadow in the corner of every story. It is about the life that exists in spite of it. It is about the pranks, the late nights in the common room, the arguments over homework, the first time Remus transforms and the other three sit with him. Not because they have to, but because they want to. It is about the moment the map is finished, and they stand in the 7th floor corridor, holding a piece of parchment that knows more about the castle than any ghost ever could. It is about the small, quiet moments that the books never had time for, and so the cycle continues. A new reader discovers the Marauders through a fan edit on a social media platform. They see a clip of a song, a montage of faces, a caption that reads, "They were just boys," and they are curious. They find the books. They read the chapters about the map, about the werewolf, about the betrayal, and then they find the fan fiction. They find all the young dudes. They find the stories that have been built by thousands of hands over decades, and they add their own. They write a scene about a rainy afternoon in the library. They write a conversation between Sirius and Remus that never happened in the books, but feels, somehow, like it should have. They write a version of the story where everyone lives, where the war is averted, where the laughter never stops, and that is the tribute. That is the final quiet offering to the 4 boys who were, as the maps, up to no good. They changed the wizarding world forever, but not in the way you might think. They did not change it through battles or prophecies or great acts of magic. They changed it because they left a space. They left a story that was only half told, and they trusted the people who came after to finish it. They gave us a map, but they did not draw the paths. They left that for us. So when you close this chapter, when you set down the book or the video or the fan fiction, remember this. The Marauders era is not a story that has been told. It is a story that is being told every day by someone new. It is a story that lives in the space between what we know and what we imagine. And as long as there is a reader who looks at the map and wonders, as long as there is a writer who picks up a pen and tries to capture the sound of laughter in a stone corridor, the story will never end. It will simply begin again with a new generation, a new hope, and a new understanding of what it means to be up to no good. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, or share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.